chair seated for the fire code. Yeah, and you can, and we'll call public comment. You'll be able to come back in. Don't worry, you won't miss your turn to speak. Thank you all.
These seats are taken, or are they just have for one? Taken? Yes. That's a taken seat? Okay. Hey, John. Hey, Matt. Get Matt.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much.
Is she there? She said she
Sir, I'm going to start the meeting. Thank you very much. Thanks for organizing all the seating. Good morning, everyone. You know, we have new microphones now. I can't tell if you're hearing me or not because it's not like a normal microphone. I'm not getting, everybody's hearing everything fine? Super. Okay, wonderful. Good morning. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council. It is Tuesday, February 18th, 2020, and it's 9:02 a.m. Would you please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance?
We gather to make decisions for our community. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is best for our community and our fellow citizens.
Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow, that sounds different.
It does. It sounds nice. So, you know, we've got quite a few public hearings on today, and I'm just going to ask you all to be very respectful of differing opinions. I won't tolerate clapping or booing. That's not why we're here. We're here to engage in civil discourse, and so that's just a polite warning at the advance, okay? The first item on the agenda is the approval of the final agenda.
Motion to approve?
Okay, if I could just click on that, and I can't. Gosh darn it. There's a motion to approve and a second, and hearing no objection, the motion carries unanimously. Next item is the minutes, and these are the minutes of February 3rd, 2020, and February 6th, 2020. May I have a motion on the minutes, please?
I'll move to approve. Second.
Okay, so there is a motion by Joanne and a second by Rexanne. Your screens are up now. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, the motion carries unanimously. The next item is public comment. If you have public comment on any agenda item, you may speak at the beginning. If you're here to testify in the course of a public hearing, we advise that you wait until the public hearing and speak then. So otherwise, other than a public hearing, is there anybody who wishes to make comment? Yes. So when you come to the microphone, state your name for the record, and then you've got 3 minutes.
Lori Needhouse.
Good morning, Lori.
Hi, thank you. I want to ending can barely convey to you what an appalling idea. It implies that we are a place without identity, and that is certainly not the case. If you close your eyes and say, Fort Myers Beach, it evokes emotion and feelings and images. We have visitors from all across the United States, from Canada, from Germany, England, France, Italy. We are Fort Myers Beach. We are known. We do not need to change our name, abbreviate our name, or layer it in any fashion. Good Lord, I don't think we even need a special font. And if this does pass, I fear that we are going to be, aside from there's going to be expense and confusion, we as a community are going to be bombarded with, well, why did you do that? And I think people are going to make that face when they ask, why did you do that? And our reply can only be, we don't really know why they did that. I think it is a tremendous waste of this council's time and resources to pursue this, and I would simply beg that you stop.
Thank you, Lori. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on Jesse?
Jessica Titus, Fort Myers Beach, 40 years. Bay and the other on branding. I'm here to address, first, boat speed in the Back Bay. We have one of the most diverse estuary systems in the whole planet right in our backyard. I'm begging you to help protect our marine family. We now have the award for the most manatee deaths caused by marine accidents in the whole United States. If we want to keep this award, do nothing. That's not acceptable. If we want to protect them, just as we do our children in school zones, I beg you to lower the speed. They cannot protect themselves against us. We are the stewards, and we need to step up and take control. We are supposedly the intelligent species. And as for branding, the letters FMB, it's a great brand for cattle. Fort Myers Beach is more than a seahorse, a shell, or a sunset. It's Lee County's playground, it's the family island, it's a state of mind, and that's what draws people. In fact, just promote us more as an island. Our name is already known worldwide. Why should we reinvent our own wheel? Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Good morning. You could go right there. Yes.
I am here today representing the owners in Bay Beach, asking your help in seeking a variance to the existing Florida statute 327.46, which has changed the speed in the designated south end of the island. We want to reinstate the prior local ordinance that designated the south end of Fort Myers Beach as an idle speed, no wake zone. It is our understanding that the town of Fort Myers Council must present this variance to the state of Florida for us. We are concerned that the present speed limit creates a major public safety hazard and adverse environmental conditions. As you are aware, the intersection of the canal from Fishtail Marina with the main Back Bay channel is a very busy intersection, with the canal servicing the marina, restaurants, and boat docks for several associations. We have boats entering and exiting the canal and boats simply speeding through the channel. Recently, 13 high-performance boats literally sped through the channel. A pontoon boat got caught in the wake of the speeding boats. Their wave action almost made him collide with the seawall. There has also been an injury reported due to the wake of a speeding boat. The traffic congestion created by many boats of varying sizes, speeds, and directions in this narrow channel will result in more incidents and accidents if the speed is not reduced. We're also seriously concerned about the manatee population in the area. Lee County has led the state in manatee deaths, including deaths that are boat-related incidences in 2018 and 2019. At that time, the south end of the island was a no-wake. Increasing the boat speed has put even more manatees at risk. We are baffled by the fact that the north end of the island is a manatee zone, no-wake, year-round, but the south end is seasonal. Do they stay up north? In addition, the mangroves are being exceptionally disturbed by the horrible wave action and accelerating erosion on the shoreline. We are presenting to Council over 600 signatures and still counting on a petition asking to restore this to a no-wake area year-round. We are a large group of homeowners truly concerned with what is happening to our surroundings with this change in boat speed during the busiest months of the year. And why? To save a boater 5 minutes of time in getting from A to B? Our safety, wildlife, and ecological system deserves better. Thank you for your time and consideration of this important issue today. We need your assistance to change the speed limit before we have a serious accident.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
And-
If you would give that to,
I'll take it.
You'll take it?
thank you.
It's a copy of the petitions and all of the articles that I sent to
I
council.
know this is out of order, but she said she was representing Bay Beach. Representing EBIA or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Mac Banky, and I'm here on behalf of the Waterside Dock Association, you know, what we're talking about right here. And I am a taxpayer in the state of Florida, Lee County, and Fort Myers Beach. I'm also a resident. I'm also the president, as I said, of Waterside Dock, located just south of Coon Key on the south part of Fort Myers Beach at Bay Beach Lane. I'm here on behalf of the owners of the association who cannot access their boat slips because they have been damaged due to the excessive weight of the speeding boats by the increased boat speed limit. This is the first time the speed limit has been changed in over 25 years. To date, I've issued a warning to all slip owners to travel at their own risk because of the unsafe environment this new speed limit has caused. With the wakes these boats are making, it can raise our docks more than a foot in a split second, making it virtually impossible to navigate safely on our docks. Nowhere on Fort Myers Beach do they have a speed limit like they have in front of our improved docks. They all maintain a no-wake zone. I'm sure you've read enough about the issue we are having, but let's look at the unwanted financial distress you've caused our association. And I'm not really pointing fingers, just the state. We've received many estimates in fixing the damage that has been done to these unwanted wakes. To date, we will have to find a way to pay a contractor, hopefully local, $200,000 to make our docks safe again. And that's just the slips that are broken now. If it continues at the rate it has, there will be more repairs that we cannot afford to repair. We budget annually $35,000 to do the maintenance on the docks, and historically that amount has been sufficient to get the job done. These docks have been through 5 named hurricanes, and nothing compares to the damage that they have sustained from the wakes of these boats going 25 miles an hour. Well, let's forget about the safety of the general public. Let's forget about the wildlife, and also forget about the erosion these wakes are doing to the shoreline. Let's concentrate on the numbers, aka tax revenues. These 42 slips pay the state of Florida, Lee County, and yes, the city of Fort Myers Beach, since the inception of the Waterside Dock Association, close to $260,000 in sales transfer tax of all of these slips. The owners together pay over $30,000 annually to the city for property tax. What will happen to this tax revenue when our owners can no longer utilize their docks? The value of these docks are greatly diminished because of the safety factor due to the high speeds which develop after the wakes. Finally, the sales tax alone these boats owners paid to the state of Florida for the purchase of their boats should gain some attention. In closing, we are not requesting a tax abatement, a grant, a freebie from the city of Fort Myers Beach. We're just requesting the powers to be in the local government to respect our investment and to change the speed limit to a no-wake zone so we can save our property. And if I have any time left, I'd like to give it to John Russo.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak? Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Michelle?
I do have some that have signed up by paper.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, council members. My name is
morning,
John. My name is John Russo. I've been an owner in the Bay Beach community for over 36 years. Both of the residents that I've owned are located directly on this channel. I'm an avid boater. I'm a boat owner. I'm a dock owner. I've seen everything happen in this area. I've seen manatees mating on the low areas. I've seen dolphins playing, waterfowl. It's tranquil, magnificent. That's the reason why I bought there. The only thing I haven't seen in 36 years is a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. Never in 36 years that I have been here seen a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. I now live over 21 years directly across from the marker that has been changed to 25 miles an hour. There was never a sign there. If there was, it was invisible. This speed limit has had such a negative impact on the residents of Waterside and residents of Bay Beach, and no gain. There is absolutely no gain. So why did this happen now? So we're told that someone did a survey to replace the signs, and the research revealed that the signs were out of compliance with a statute number 327 that dates back to 1959. It's archaic. Even though there's been amendments up to 2005, they're not applicable today. And not only that, why do it? Who did the studies? Where's the proof? Were there any feasibility studies done? Were there any safety studies done? Were there any boating congestion studies done? Were there any soil erosion studies done? Were there any studies done on the impact that the wake would have on the personal property that's around this area? Were there any studies on the manatees? I don't understand why there's a law that says there's no manatees there now. People, we see manatees there every day. They don't go up to the power plants now, especially now. We have warm water there now. They're staying there. There's manatees there. You're going to run me out of time. I'm going to go right to the end, okay, and make this very simple. This same statute states that you, the council, the municipality, and the county have the authority to change this zone back to a no-wake zone, okay? So, per state and federal law, an operator is responsible for his or her vessel's wake and any damage or personal injury it's caused. It's causing a ton of problems. One more second, please. I am petitioning this council now to please enact immediately a moratorium on this speed limit so that we can do the proper studies to find out if it's applicable.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Please know that we're very sympathetic to this issue. We're well aware of it. Michelle, will you want to call the next people?
Yes, I had Doris Grant,
Doris? And who will be next following Doris, Michelle?
Larry Wood,
Larry, you'll be runner-up.
On deck.
On deck.
Doris Grant,
Jesse, will you let two people know that they can take your seats when you go out? Thank you. Thank you, Doris. Go ahead.
Doris Grant, President Reed. Mayor, Council. We're swiftly approaching Election Day to elect 3 persons to fill the 3 vacant council seats. We have 7 qualified candidates vying for the open council seats. I would like to personally invite all council members to attend, as well as those persons in attendance today at this meeting, and those that are watching via TV broadcast from home, to this open forum. For sure know that Councilman Butcher will be there. In that regard, there will be an open forum on Wednesday, February the 26th at 6:30 p.m. at St. Raphael's Church, located at 5601 Williams Drive. This is sponsored by a group of residents of Fort Myers Beach. This will be, the 3rd or 4th forum, sponsored by the same group of ladies. We are pleased to once again bring this open forum to Fort Myers Beach. The questions asked will be those that are in that are in attendance, unless someone unable to attend should send us a question. If time permits, we will ask that question. In closing, Anita, Joanne, I would personally like to express my 1,000 thank yous to each of you for the endless hours of community service that you both have so graciously afforded the town of Fort Myers Beach and the community over the past years, as well as other council members, past and present. I will miss you. your experience, and your expertise. God bless you.
Doris, thank you for always being so gracious yourself. Thank you very much. Mr. Wood? Doris, did you say that was at 6:30?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Larry Wood, Dolphin Point, Waterside 5. John Russo, did you need more time, or has the building? Okay.
Leave anytime.
Thanks. I'd like to draw an analogy, if I may. On the back bay, the area right by Waterside 5 is relatively narrow, and then it spreads out, and at that point, boats were allowed to go 25 miles an hour as they headed toward Lover's Key or the bridge.
The big Carlos Bass.
Okay, so let's draw an analogy with the other end of the island. As you're heading off the island over the Sky Bridge, at the base, the road spreads out, and the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. Now, let's say we ran across some rather obscure statute that said, actually, it should be the 45 should start at Lani Kai and go off the bridge. You'd say, oh, of course we can't do that. There's too many people there. There's too many people there. It's too narrow. Well, that's the same thing down in the other end of the water. It is a narrow area, as they pointed out. A lot of boats, they're going back and each way, and from the bay pole over to the fishing dock, it's relatively narrow. So we just ask that that be reconsidered and allow that 25 mile an hour to start again when the water spreads out. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
I only have those for public hearings.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on anything outside of a public hearing? Anyone? Okay, public comment is closed. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is local achievements and recognitions. Bruce, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Ray?
No.
Roxanne?
Yes, I'd like to thank all the groups that are putting on the public candidate forums. Besides Doris's group, the Beach Ministerial Association is also putting on a forum, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. I can tell you from having worked on those in the past, I know that you don't just put an ad in the paper and magically a public forum happens. There's a lot of work that goes on, a lot of volunteers make those happen. It's an important part of our democracy that people are educated about voting. I encourage you to attend those forums, and I thank the groups that are putting them on.
Thank you, Roxanne. Joanne?
Is that working?
Okay. So
And number
Colton,
two,
if he hears
just so
that.
you know. And number two, then, season's in full force, and I just want to thank everyone in the community who is either employed or volunteering to make all the excitement that happens on our island happen when everyone's here. And that includes the drivers who politely yield with a smile, and those who watch out for pedestrians and bicycles, and also ask that the pedestrians also act equally courteously to try to help traffic keep flowing and only use the crosswalks. But let's all work together to have a safe and fun and vibrant season here on Fort Myers Beach.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is advisory committees and reports. And we have a report from CELCAB. Barbara Hill, where are you? Barbara is outside. Barbara, if you hear me, Barbara Hill. Calling once, calling, here she comes. And we also have Bill Veach. Wonderful. You were in the back 40. Thank you, Barbara. Good morning.
Good morning, members of County Council and staff. I'm Barbara Hill, Chair of CELCAB, and I'm happy to give you our annual report on the progress that we've made. CELCAB is pleased to report the Mound House has celebrated 4 years of providing programs of excellence to our community and its visitors. Last November 14th, during our well-attended anniversary event, is there a mic here? How does that? We've got a new mic. Is it good? I keep forgetting. This is the thing that you're supposed to move.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. We announced that the Mound House is now officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The bronze plaque now recognizes this achievement, which will be prominently displayed on the exterior wall by the main entrance to the museum. Mound House operations continue to bring successful outcomes thanks to a hardworking staff, dedicated volunteers, and the support of Town Council, and thank you for that. We earned a 5-star rating from TripAdvisor. Its Hall of Fame's Certificate of Excellence also recognizes 5 years of consistently high ratings from travelers. And we also have a 4.6 rating from Google. The budget's year-to-year net sales from the last 3 years reflect steady and healthy financial growth. This includes revenue from admissions, programs, special events, membership, and the museum store. As with the Mound House, Newton Park, the town's other historical site now has its own strategic working action plan. CELCAB reviews these working documents every 6 months, which outline short and long-term goals for programs, operations, funding, and long-range projects on a biannual basis. We know that once we've had the chance to review that, it is then updated and implemented by town staff. One of the short-term goals listed in the strategic plan for the Mound House is to provide additional special events. And so actually we've got a wonderful event planned, the free screening of the documentary Troubled Waters at the Mound House Friday, February 21st at 7 p.m. So I hope all of you will attend and hope members of the community and the general public will also attend. Finally, CELCAB recognizes the outstanding contributions made by members of the Friends of the Mound House. They provide support for its programs such as lecture series, youth summer camp scholarships, and supplementing the marketing expenses, providing a monetary match for the county's Arts and Attractions grant. So it's a wonderful report to give to you, and I'm delighted to do it. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you, Barbara. Any questions for Barbara?
No, thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work, Barbara.
Thank you.
Bill, did you have a report to give?
And before Bill starts speaking, my computer is now got a blue screen in the middle of it.
Nothing but blue screen.
There's a blue screen covering my agenda.
Bill Beach from the Marine Resources Task Force. Yeah, I didn't have a chance to get anything in your packet because you just had a meeting with 7 days of your but the first thing I'd like to talk about is this speed limit down south and or Fort Myers Beach's Audubon, as you want to probably call it now. I know you're all sympathetic to it. We've been looking into, and this is with staff and with some help from some people who've been looking up information, including Sue Morris, is that the town. First time I looked at this, it was like, okay, the ordinance says the town has to ask for this wakeless zone. And the town never has because the town never needed to because the signs are always there. But there's only certain reasons why you can ask. And one of the reasons is that it said any boat, hoist, marine railway, or other launching and landing facility available for use by the general public within 300 feet of this waterway. Chad has looked into this. He said that their interpretation of that is it's got to be public. So privately owned docks are not covered, and private property on the shore is not something that they aim to protect. So apparently these docks aren't public enough. There's other reasons, and we're still kind of waiting on a more concrete definition of that. There's other reasons, including safety, but I'd hate to think that we have to wait for someone to get hurt before they implement some kind of safety-based trigger on this. There's densities, there's manatees are another reason. They're all things that we're looking at, and we're working to come up with a way for town council to be able to address this in an efficient way and appeal as soon as we can to get this changed. But again, there's guidelines that need to be along those guidelines. There is a bill currently in the Senate that allows, one of the conditions is, allows the municipality to change the speed limit within 200 feet of any shoreline without any other conditions. My understanding, talking to someone who knows how these bills go, it has a very slim chance of passing. Because it also kind of smells of stronger home rule, which we know is not very popular in the state right now. Is there any kind of questions or guidance you have on what you want us to do going forward with this?
Bill, I have a question for you specifically about the speed limit. Mr. Russo mentioned that, or it might have been Ms. Morris mentioned about a county, that the town and the county had to petition the state. Is that accurate? I mean,
You know, I'm not really sure how that process is going to work. I know there's a lot of interleaving things. It does mention, the whoever has jurisdiction, so I think the town could petition. Having the county behind you might have more weight.
Okay,
They do it jointly,
we can work on that,
yeah.
absolutely. Okay, go ahead. Any other questions relative to that for Bill?
I don't have a question, but while they're on the topic, we have a lot of people here today who came for other reasons that are not aware of this issue, and I want to make it clear to everybody, the town did not change the speed limit.
Yep.
This is not something we did, and that inference has been out there. We are aghast that it was changed, and I congratulate Murph for jumping on it right away, and Bill for doing extra research. I can tell you from having been here many years ago that there was another time that the town tried to change some speed limits. Just because we ask doesn't mean it happens. So we have to do this correctly. We can't just blast in and say, you know, we've got to be prepared to support what it is we're asking for, or we will fail. So as much as people want us to do this very quickly, it may take longer than people hope, and just because we ask doesn't mean it's going to happen, so we want to be sure that we're very prepared.
And I've noticed, I went out and watched for a while, you know, 80% of the people, the boaters there, are very polite. They're still going slow, but then, you know, you get big V-holes that come out and they're in a hurry to go fishing, and they can, you know, legally go 25 miles an hour right next to a dock. They're responsible for the damage, but that's pretty difficult to enforce. You know, it's hard to write down the number of a boat when you're trying to not fall over. Okay, the next thing is the boardwalk, and this is just a statement. The Murph consensus on the boardwalk proposal is that we agree with the opinion of the Audubon Society, that they were founded, their primary mission is to advocate for the protection of birds. They recognize the birds do not recognize borders, lines, boundaries, and neither do their predators. They're staffed with biologists and ornithologists who are learned, experienced, and passionate about protecting birds. We think their motives as far as protecting birds are the purest of any of the cast of characters in this. And then the third, trying to go quickly because I know there's a lot of things going on here. With the lighting, we're encouraged that the town is looking beyond the limited offerings of FP&L. There's been other municipalities that have gone through this. Treasure Island went through. Duke Energy started installing the lights without their permission. They received letters from the FWC saying civil fines and criminal charges have been successfully filed against other entities that refuse to control their lights, and they're making changes. I've reached out to Treasure Island to see where they are. I've also reached out to the manufacturers of other lights to see what's available. My understanding, too, is that some of these were done when it was a different entity. It was Gulf Power, and then Gulf Power was bought by an FP&L, and some of those options went away when that happened.
Okay, any questions for Bill? Bill, thank you very much for your work.
Well, thank you for your time.
We appreciate it.
Mayor, I believe that Mr. Forrest Kritzer would like to speak regarding the Community Resource Advisory Board.
Yes, sir. Come on up, Forrest. Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning. And for the record, Forrest Kritzer, I'm a member of the Community Resource Action Board for Craft. Been a member since about 2016 and have been vice chair along with Bill in that process. I got involved with the committee then right after an unsuccessful bid for the council and was told you need to get more active. I got active. And right away, I was approached by something that holds dear to my heart because I am a veteran of the Vietnam War. There's many communities around us that have memorials for their veterans. We have established here at Fort Myers Beach because of World War II, because the men that came down from Page Field, what I've been told by the historians and Miss Bassett, and how by the way, we also had traffic then too. But besides that, the fact remains is that we do not have a memorial for our veterans living and dead. I was approached and we brought it for CRAB, and council gave us authority to run with that. So we ran with it. And we hit an obstacle, and that was financing. And so we were going to go out for private financing, and I started searching, and there was people who were very interactive with that and wanted to do that, but we were advised that the council has to first give us authorization to seek that private funding for the War Memorial. So we had to wait for the council's approval of that. Joanne is our liaison officer for the council. She's been very gracious to keep us informed of what's going on. And she didn't have to remind us that government moves slowly. Well, it's been 4 years. But anyway, when we started this, and this was a birth of something that we would like to have done. And all of a sudden, we became involved in the Bay project. And it kept growing. And I kept saying, when they asked, well, what about the memorial? And they said, well, it would be a great thing to make that the pivot point of it down by Nervous Nellies. And then we can have the memorial there, a flag, a light. It would be the focal point, bring people down the street, bring business down the street, bring veterans coming in, because believe me, they will come if we had that memorial there, just as Cape Coral. We saw that as a great avenue. So we started going in that way. I said, all right, we'll back off. It's going to be in a project. We're going to make the whole thing look real nice and go down there. I said, but why can't we start with the memorial right there on the water? It's not going to affect what goes up the street. Again, on and on. We had a meeting with ORCAB and the advisory committee one afternoon sitting right here. And they said, Forrest, it's a real good idea. Keep pressing the issue. So I pressed the issue. Well, I was very discouraged 2 weeks ago when I came to town council and to planning meeting and heard the layout of that. They talked about the fountains that the kids can play in, and that's a great thing. We have it where my home used to be in Kentucky for the kids down on the Ohio River. And they talked about a pool for people to put their feet in, a place for them to seat. Do you know that memorial was never mentioned? I followed the guy. No, you mentioned it in the council, but it was not mentioned in the drawing, as they showed the drawing on the board about all that laid out. I followed the guy out the door. And I says, I'm Forrest Kretzer with Crab, and we've been fighting for a war memorial down there for 4 years. He said, that's a good idea. I don't know where the ball got dropped at, but I'm telling you, folks, we need that memorial. And I talked to Mr. Murphy 2 weeks ago, and I said, Mr. Murphy, you know, it'd be a great thing. We have a World War II veteran resident of this beach. It'd be a great thing to have that built before he goes on to be with the Lord. I hope I see it before I go on to be with the Lord, but I'd love to see Mr. Murphy be the grand marshal of that, pull that string, and see that World War II memorial come to pass. Does anyone have any questions?
Go ahead.
Statement. And at that meeting too, I too was disappointed, and we did discuss with the design team the specifics of adding. We talked about whether it would be called a veteran memorial or a veteran tribute, but we are with you in terms of making sure that that's part of the design conversation for Bayfront. So we have people that are on it. And I agree with you, it's frustrating. I mean, I'm going to be off council before these things happen, and I would love to still have my hand on it. Maybe you'll be on. But we're working on it. We're not going to let it drop, the conversation drop for you.
Well, I would say that Bill is a fantastic chairman for that committee, also a past chairperson. And we have had taken pictures even out of the country of memorials. And we have older designs, we have new designs, and we have pictures, all that. I wish I had put them on the screen for you to see today. It might have brought more encouragement to it. They saw what we have in mind. But I would much appreciate your progression on this and advise that committee who is doing those drawings. And I thank you for your time. If there's
Thank you,
no
Forrest.
other question, I'll be finished.
Other questions for Forrest? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Michelle, you want to know what's bad about these microphones? When Roger was talking or you were just talking, it picks up everything. I wonder if there's a way to mute that. Do you hear that, Colton? Okay, good. All right. We're moving on to the next item, which is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes the emergency debris removal monitoring renewal and a proclamation proclaiming Gambling Awareness Month. Is there someone here to receive that proclamation? Okay. And a special event permit for Nervous Nellies and St. Patrick's Day.
Madam Chair, I will move to approve the whole consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ray and a second by Rexanne. Is there any further discussion? The motion carries unanimously, I'm guessing, if Bruce will vote. So thank you very much. Next item on the agenda will begin our public hearings. And the first public hearing is actually a rehearing for a SEZ 2019-0049. It is a rehearing for the Dune Walkover and Boardwalk at 8150 and 8170 Estero Boulevard. Mr. Herron?
Yes, ma'am. As you all are aware, this prior meeting, you all authorized this item come back to you on the applicant's request for rehearing. As a result, it is before you. I've drafted a memo that's part of the package indicating that the scope of the proceedings, and I have had discussions with counsel for the applicant, that it is limited to the issues that are raised in the motion for rehearing. I made mention of 3 particular issues that were raised. That is not exclusive. It is up to the applicant to demonstrate that it meets the criteria for the rehearing and then if you all believe that information is persuasive, then it would be appropriate for the council to vote to approve. If you are not persuaded by the arguments of the applicant that something was done improperly at the first hearing, then it would be appropriate for the council to vote to uphold the prior decision. At this point in time, this is a quasi-judicial item.
Yes.
So anyone who is going to testify on this matter should stand and be sworn in.
That includes everybody who's going to give comment under the public comment element. So if you're going to speak about this hearing, you need to stand right now and be sworn in, please.
Bobby?
And here comes Mary Rose. Thank you, Mary Rose. All right, go ahead, John.
Please raise your right hand. Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This has been sworn. The next step in the process will be
Ex
for
parte.
the council to disclose any ex parte communications.
One more to be sworn in.
Don't worry. If somebody else comes in too, we'll swear you in at the thing. Yeah. Thank you, Gloria.
At this point in time, it would be appropriate for the individual council members to disclose any ex parte communications you may have had with respect to this item, and briefly discuss what the substance of those ex parte communications were. And please remember that your decision here today is based upon what you hear today, not what you may have heard necessarily through an ex parte communication or reading in the newspaper, on web, whatever.
Thank you, John. Okay, Bruce, ex parte communications.
Is that all times or since?
Since the last hearing.
None.
Right?
I have had none since the prior disclosures.
I'm going to assume that you all are including, or you.
Well,
We have
emails.
emails that are a public record. Okay, Rexanne?
I was going to say, I've received numerous emails as well as Facebook postings and messages.
Okay, Joanne?
Just emails, all in the public record, and including email from Mr. Herron, but that's also in the agenda.
I have, just yesterday, I visited with Mr. Kramer and Mr. Rude, and Mr. Kramer's wife, Mary. I spoke with Gail Pergoli, Ellen Vaughn, Penny Jarrett. I believe I spoke with Mary Rose. I spoke with Dan Hughes. I spoke with Jim Steele. I've spoken, if I've left somebody out, I've spoken with a lot of people on this, and I appreciate all of your comments. I'm just trying to think if there's somebody else that just comes to my mind. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Okay, so we will open the public hearing. Ma'am? Morning.
Good morning. Amy Petrick with Lewis Longman and Walker on behalf of the applicants. Before I start any substantive comments, as a matter of procedure, and I've spoken to Mr. Herron, if I may, I'd like to provide you with some binders so that you can follow along with the testimony that I intend to elicit today from our witnesses, if the council is amenable to that.
I have no objection to that. Do you, Mr. Herron? No. Okay. Anybody have an open chair next to them? Thank you.
More stuff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just have one for
We'll need one for the clerk.
I do. Mr. Herron. If I may, we have witnesses. I'd like to.
Can you go back to the microphone, please?
Sorry about that. We have a couple of brief witnesses. I'd like to provide this for them to testify with, if I may put it on that podium so they can refer to it. Thank you. So the first thing I would like to do is thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to have this rehearing. We appreciate your thoughtful consideration of the points that we've made. We do intend to make this as brief as possible and to not belabor any of the issues that were addressed in the prior hearing. To that end, I have provided, as a matter of convenience in your binders, a copy of the PowerPoint from last hearing. I do not intend to address it substantively. But
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you give your name for the record?
I did.
Okay.
Amy Petrick from Lewis Longman and Walker on
Thank you.
behalf of the applicants.
Thank you, Ms.
Yes,
Petrick.
ma'am. So you have it in the event that you have a question that comes to your mind as you hear the testimony and you want to refer back, but I will not be going back over those points. If I may reserve just a couple of minutes at the end of this presentation to address those points that are primarily legal and not evidentiary in nature, that would be very much appreciated. And I do not intend to do a substantive opening because I'm trying to make this as brief as possible. I know you guys are very busy today. So unless there are any procedural matters that we would need to address, I'd like to call Shane Johnson.
Mr. Herron, anything procedural?
Nothing.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, that's for you.
Okay. Hi, for the record, Shane Johnson. Morning.
Mr. Johnson, what do you do for a living?
My title is a senior ecologist. I work for the ecological consulting firm of Passarella and Associates.
Okay, can you turn to tab 1 of the binder that is in front of you? Is that your curriculum vitae?
It is.
Okay, and so for people who don't use that Latin phrase, is that your resume?
Yes.
Is it an accurate copy of the experience, certifications, education, and work that you have done?
It is.
Okay. Are you familiar with the proposed dune that forms the subject of this hearing? How did you become familiar with it?
First, the proposed dune walkover through Lewis Longman and Walker, who asked me to take a look at the case specifically with respects to adverse or impacts in general to nesting shorebirds.
Did you perform any studies or evaluations as part of your work on the proposed dune walkover?
I did.
Okay. Before we address that issue, have you gone to the site recently?
I have. My last site visit was last Friday, February 14th, 2020.
Okay. And was there anything during your site visit that changed your original opinions regarding the proposed dune walkover and its potential for impacts on the habitat or wildlife?
No.
Okay, so can you tell us what your study of the proposed dune walkover and the area resulted in terms of your opinion regarding impacts to the habitat and the wildlife?
Before he speaks, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Heron, it's my understanding that this hearing is limited to new issues of fact, and if it's a new issue of fact, it could not have been discoverable even prior to our prior hearing. So if this is a study that he did prior, the other thing is misapplication of law, and I don't hear that he's testifying about misapplication of law, but this does seem to be falling outside the scope of a rehearing.
It is up to this council, given the parameters of the scope, which I think Councilmember Hosfrost, you correctly stated, to give whatever weight, if any, to the testimony. To the extent that this testimony was available at the first hearing and wasn't presented during that first hearing, then that wouldn't be newly discovered evidence, and you would then give his testimony the whatever weight, if any, based upon that consideration. As a matter of courtesy, or you certainly can ask Mr. Johnson or the applicant's attorney as to how this testimony fits into the issues raised in the motion for rehearing.
I guess I would turn to counsel and say, if you could please phrase your questions so that we understand whether this is new or not, because we're only supposed to be hearing things that were either new or something that couldn't have been discovered previously. So
I'm sure what Mr. Johnson's today relates directly to notice of. And so you're going to hear about vegetation and how that impacts the definition of dunes from Mr. Johnson.
last hearing that you had no notice of.
And specifically what I'm talking about is Mr., and I'm afraid I might not get his last name right, Schutz. His first name was Chad. His discussion of the idea that certain vegetational aspects near the vicinity of the dune walkover rendered it not a dune walkover. That was information that we as an applicant had never heard of or seen before. We had in fact never heard of Mr. Schutz at all. So it will be completely new information that we had no opportunity to develop in the prior hearing that you're going to hear from Mr. Johnson. His explanation of what he did originally is predicate to that part of the conversation. And so giving you that...
Your implication was you didn't have notice of the hearing.
No,
You
ma'am.
did have notice of the hearing. You're saying you were unaware of that evidence.
Correct. We had no notice that that evidence existed or would be presented at the hearing. That is what I meant to say.
But it was discoverable.
It's not discoverable if nobody tells you that the person exists, the testimony exists, the data exists, the photographs exist. That was not disclosed to us, and therefore this is all new evidence.
Okay. I'm going to register my continuing objection to counsel if the rest of the council wants to allow this testimony. But I don't believe that this falls within the purview of a rehearing personally. And I will certainly listen, but I would certainly request that if it's something that's really, truly new and not discoverable, that you point that out. But I asked my fellow counselors to weigh in on
Does anyone
this.
have any objection to them proceeding? John, do you have any objection to them proceeding?
I think that the applicant has the due process right to make a proffer to what they believe. However, with that said, where in the motion for rehearing is this issue raised by the applicant to warrant the testimony?
Ms. Petrick, could you please make this relative?
If you refer to the request for rehearing, you will see that there is at paragraph 15, the reference to whether or not the dune walkover and the boardwalk, whether or not there is a dune walkover or a boardwalk because of the dune vegetation. So that issue was expressly identified, and in 14 as well. And then the discussion of whether or not this has a harmful effect on wildlife and habitat was addressed in, one sec. It's 8 and 9, talking about no competent substantial evidence as to whether or not it would protect, conserve, or preserve environmentally critical areas or natural resources.
Ms. Petrick?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not going to quibble over this process here. I'd like you to continue,
Oh,
and
yes.
I'd like you to fulfill Ms. Hosfross's request and specifically point out issues that you feel are new relating to the rehearing.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Johnson, let me move you to the conversation about whether or not this constitutes a dune walkover based on the definition of dune and dune vegetation. Have you had occasion to look at that issue?
I have.
And did you become aware that testimony was offered during the last hearing regarding whether or not the terminus of the dune walkover will be in an area that traverses something that qualifies as a dune? Okay. In evaluating this issue, did you have occasion to look at the town's land development code and its terms for dune and dune walkover? And I turn your attention to tab 6, the binder that is in front of you.
I have had an opportunity to review the definitions in the town's LDC.
Okay, and just for the record, at the bottom of the first page at tab 6 is section 14-1, and there is a definition for both dune and dune vegetation. And so just looking at the definition of dune and dune vegetation, did you develop an opinion as to whether or not this walkover traverses an area that would constitute a dune?
I did formulate an opinion regarding the definition of dune, where the southern terminus of the proposed dune walkover ends or lands. I believe that area, it's a finger-like projection. I don't know if there's a map or something we can refer to, but there's a finger-like projection where the southern terminus of that proposed dune walkover ends. And I certainly would say that is consistent with a portion of the definition of dune, specifically emergent zone of loose sediment. I certainly agree with and feel that area is consistent with that portion of definition of dune, again, emergent zone of loose sediment, that will support dune vegetation.
Just turn your attention to tab 5. You were talking about a graphic. Does tab 5 assist in you identifying the area that you're discussing?
Yes.
Okay, so what is tab 5?
Tab 5 is a composition, it's an aerial photograph. I don't recall the date specifically of the aerial, but it includes many photographs that I took over the course of several site visits to the property in the vicinity of the proposed dune walkover. And the photographs are primarily vegetation that exists in the area, some signage that's located in proximity to the proposed dune walkover, and a portion of staking and roping that was used to delineate a nesting colony.
Okay, so turning your attention to tab 2, do the photographs that we see at graphic at tab 5 that you were just discussing?
Do.
Okay, and are those photos that you took?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Do those photos inform your opinion as to whether or not this is an area that has dune vegetation consistent with the definition for dune vegetation at tab 6?
They do. The photographs in tab 2, there's several species that I identified, again, in that finger-like projection. where the southern portion of the board, where the dune walkover terminates. Several species that are actually in the town's definition of dune vegetation that are represented in that finger, specifically bay cedar, there's beech elder, and also green buttonwood are represented in that finger. Again, and that relates directly to the definition of dune vegetation, which lists a number of species that could be found in a dune system, including those 3 particular species that I noted.
Okay, and so consistent with that evaluation of your graphs and the town's listing of vegetation that one would find in a dune area, did you have occasion to see what you had to say about what vegetation one would?
It's consistent with the species that I identified, specifically the DEP list. Talk about dunes and dune restoration. They have a specific list of plants that they recommend, and the 3 species that I mentioned and that I identified in the vicinity of the proposed dune walkover, beech elder, bay cedar, and green buttonwood were all on that list.
So at the hearing that held on this application, there was discussion about whether or not dune walkovers were appropriate in dynamic areas. Are you aware of that, that discussion on the part of the council?
Yes, loosely.
Okay. And
Did you say loosely?
Yes, I'm familiar. Yep.
Okay.
Not word for word.
In your work as an expert in field, do you have an opinion as to whether or not a dune walkover helps or hurts in dynamic in this way in terms of maintaining habitat?
I feel that a dune walkover in this particular instance would be beneficial. It's my understanding that residents north of the proposed dune walkover create their own path, more or less, from their residence or from their rental areas to the beach. There's no fixed point of access for pedestrian traffic. So with a dune walkover, that would help concentrate traffic in a unified manner and create less impacts of dune vegetation, having that centralized access to the beach.
Now, at tab 4 of this binder, I'm going to represent to you that we will hear from the public regarding these photographs as being taken in the by a nearby homeowner. And I would just ask if you could look at them and tell me if the kind of foot traffic that we see in these photos is the type of thing that would cause harm to the habitat in the general vicinity of this property.
What I'm seeing in the photographs primarily are pedestrian foot trails, sandy foot trails that have been cut through what appears to be dune vegetation. And this is something that could be avoided if there was a centralized pedestrian location or a fixed point of access, such as a dune walkover to the beach.
Again, this is not new.
The photographs did not exist as of the
But you're
last
not allowed
hearing.
to present photographs of something that was discoverable at the time. This was all discoverable at the time. This is not new evidence.
Ultimately, it is, again, your decision whether or not you to consider this. However, I will say, and if you look at the staff report, which is page 73 of your packet, and I think the issue that Mr. Chutz testified to is the third full paragraph on page 73. And then if you look at the staff report, the binder that you've received, the photograph in tab 5, there's a yellow line, it's pretty small, that shows the location and the terminus of the 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 dune walkover that's being proposed. And I think that the testimony, and you all may recall differently, was that it's where it ends. It doesn't end on the dry sand. It ends in the middle of the dune. And that is the concern that staff identified in their report and their testimony, and that was before you at the original hearing. It's where it ends.
But the testimony that was just given about the photographs in 4 is that people are walking all different places. There are photographs of people walking all different places. This was presented to us before.
It was.
They could have taken photographs before. This is not
It's not new, Ms. Petrick.
It's not new.
I don't believe that it's, then you can exclude that from the record. You can move.
When you have a rehearing, you can have a rehearing de novo, which means you start over from the beginning, and this is not one of those.
This is not one of those.
So this council should not have to go through and exclude part of the testimony. The only testimony that should be presented to us is new, and not just new, stuff that could not have been found previously, that wasn't discoverable before. And this is definitely not new.
And at that point, a staff report at page 703 identifies the issue that Mr. Johns is testifying to as to where this ends. It ends in the middle of the dunes, not on the dry sand on the other side of the dunes. So, again, not to speak for staff, but I believe their testimony at the original hearing was, from that point forward, they're going to be walking through the dunes and creating a path, just as is now being shown in the photographs.
So if I could briefly address the concern that the council member is raising. So that there are 2 reasons why a rehearing can be requested, one of which is new facts, the other is a misapplication of the law to the facts. In our request for rehearing, we've addressed both. We believe that the discussion about the dune vegetation and its conclusion that we think was wrongly resolved by at least one of the council members who said, you're not a dune walkover because you don't go over dunes. We are addressing that issue with information because we did not have an opportunity to do that the last time because nobody told us that that argument was going to be made. We have 2 other witnesses that are going to be brief and that are going to address things that are a combination of new facts, new testimony you haven't heard, new evidence that you haven't seen, and it relates directly to what we believe are misapplications of the law. And so I would request, for example, Mr. Herron has just now indicated you terminate in the vegetation, and that was the issue. At the last hearing, I told you that the permit actually requires us to clear the dune vegetation, and I pointed out the special condition number 6 that requires it. I didn't bring that up again because that is an argument I have already made. You have that. You know that DEP is requiring us to clear the dune vegetation. I'm not saying that again to you, but I do want you to hear new information that you have not heard because it is clear from the comments that on certain points, the board members have misimpressions. This is our chance to address those before anybody has to go any farther with any other kinds of proceedings. And so I understand what you're saying. I would please ask that you allow me to proffer the information. If you find it beneficial, then you can consider it. If you do not, then at least we feel like we've done our best to avoid future proceedings.
One of the statements that you made is that we didn't anticipate this argument to be made. It's council's job to anticipate the arguments. And just because somebody made an argument that you didn't anticipate doesn't give you the right to then come back and rebut it later in the rehearing. Again, I'm all about you get a rehearing, but you need to limit what you're presenting to us and be concise about it, please.
My perspective, an attorney, I believe that there's also a mischaracterization of the new testimony. Mayor Saracita's comments at the end of the proceeding of what she believed are her conclusions. It's not new evidence.
Go ahead, Ms. Petrick, but please be concise and limit yourself to new information. Thank you.
I appreciate the council's forbearance. I actually have no
That's a
further
great word.
questions for this witness. I don't know if the council has anything that they want to ask of the
Does
witness.
the council have any questions for this gentleman? Thank you very much.
The applicants would call Doug Grant.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Good morning.
I'd be looking at,
Nothing in the binder pertains to your testimony.
oh, okay, great.
Thank you. Mr. Grant, can you state your name and your profession for the record?
I'm Doug Grant. I have a company called the Grant Group. I've been selling real estate in this area for 30 years. And primarily sell waterfront, beachfront. Over the last 15 years, we've probably sold 30 to 40 homes on the beach here in Fort Myers Beach. In fact, I took my first listing in the 8,000 block back in 1995, so been around a little bit.
Excellent. Experience. Can you tell me whether or not you have any experience in the difference in value between a home that has a beach view and a home that has
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
This is not.
What relevance does that have to do with this?
Okay, so in the request for rehearing, one of the things that we addressed was the issue of whether or not the special exception criteria was accurately applied, and specifically because the argument was made that public benefit means public access. And so in the request for a rehearing, we addressed the issue that preserving property values is specifically one of the elements of public benefit and special exception criteria that we believe was not adequately addressed. And the 2 minutes that Mr. Grant will be talking to you is going to address what we believe is evidence that was not understood at the last hearing regarding public benefit.
Please don't underestimate our understanding of our code and our situation here. But
I
thank you for that. Mr. Heron, what's your comment on this?
Have the same concerns just been mentioned. I don't see the relevance or the connection to what particular section of the motion for rehearing, as well as to the code, how public benefit deals with property values.
Okay, and specifically if you look at paragraph 16, this exact issue was addressed in the request for rehearing. Council's decision to deny the project failed to recognize the special exception criteria calling for the consideration of the prosperity of the town and its residents. The hearing made clear a significant reduction in property values will occur, placing a substantial burden on the properties. So we addressed the issue, and we are attempting to elucidate that issue with a brief period. Mr. Grant can talk during public comment. We believe this was a more consolidated way of addressing this material.
Okay, Ms. Petrick, hold on. Mr. Heron, if they have enumerated something in their petition for rehearing, do we have to hear it?
No, if it's not related to the criteria for special exception. And I think that what I'm hearing is that the applicant is equating public benefit to property values, and that's not what our code says.
Respectfully, what I'm talking about is the quote in the special exception criteria requires that the use promote the public health, safety, welfare, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, or prosperity. That is the quote from your code. I'm not equating anything.
Well, again, the issue that I believe the applicant needs to articulate for purposes of presenting this witness is how this witness's testimony goes to that issue.
Gail, will you put your sign down, please? Thank you. Proceed.
Madam Chair, may
Yes.
I? We've now discussed the process of this twice as long as what we have discussed the case. My suggestion would be to let the counselor put on her case and be done with this. This is our last crack at it, our last bite of the apple before this moves on to some judge somewhere. Let's get it over with. I've blocked out the whole day for this meeting and the meeting following it. I don't have to be anywhere until tomorrow. Let's finish this today. Please.
I would respectfully disagree, Mr. Murphy, that we don't just let somebody put on a case. We follow the rules for putting on a case. The reason that we allow a rehearing is for very limited circumstances.
Mr. Herron, do you believe that prosperity equals property value?
The entirety of the code section that has been paraphrased or quoted is prosperity of the community at large. General health, welfare, and prosperity of the community, of the public. It doesn't say a private property owner. It specifically talks about the prosperity and the benefit and the health, safety, welfare of the
Ms.
public.
Petrick, I agree with Mr. Herron. I'm going to ask you to have Mr. Grant make his comments at public comment.
Okay. And thank you. I just do, however, want to identify for you that consideration of property rights, it's actually identified in the state comprehensive plan as an appropriate part of what state or local land development codes address.
Thank you very much. Could you move on to your next issue?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Grant, if you could please confine your comments to that has been.
We'll call you back up, Mr. Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the last person that I would like to have address the board is Kurt Kramer.
Mr. Kramer? Good morning.
Kramer.
Mr. Kramer, given the board's concerns about retreading old ground, I would ask for you to address them with respect to issues that you feel they did not consider at the last hearing. And if I may ask for him to do it in a narrative form so that you do not need to hear a belabored question and answer. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
All right. Have the binder in front of you. If there are references that you would like to make to documents that in that binder, please feel free to do so.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to ask the council if they would go to tab number 11. And what you see here in tab number 11 is aerial photographs that are taken year by year that are documented in Lee County as well as on Google Maps. And one of the points that we feel we didn't bring up at the hearing was that the ownership of the land is a critical issue to whether or not this dune walkover is being put on private land or is it being put on public land. And when we look at tab number 11 and we look at 1983 was the year that Little Estero Island was documented by Lee County. 1993 was when the CWA was formed on Little Critical Wildlife Area. What you'll see is that burn over those years continues to be washed away, washed south, and washed toward the shore of Fort Myers Beach. The aerial photograph of 2007 is when the FWC put new boundaries on an area that is on the south side of the island. Little Estero Island was almost a mile north of where our property is. And it was almost a mile north of where our property is. And so in 2007, one of the, if you go to the FWC website, the very first sentence on there says the critical wildlife areas are in conjunction with the upward land owners. And in 2007, the new boundaries that were put on Fort Myers Beach never discussed any approvals with the upland owners of Fort Myers Beach. So if we go to tab number 13, you'll find an email. And this email was from, at the time, the town technician, Ray Blake. And Ray Blake was writing this to her superior, Kara Stewart, who was the predecessor to Jason Green of the Community Development. And I want to make a quick in-between comment here, is this information that I'm about to say has been something that my neighbor, Eddie Rude, and myself have been undercover for all 4 years we've been fighting this dune walkover. We really didn't want this information to get out. I don't think it should be given out. It's not our intent to actually have challenged the location of the CWA. But back to Ray Blake's email, the last paragraph you'll see on that page, it says, and I quote, "I spoke to Patricia." Patricia is the DEP technician for Florida State, about how Submerged Land District reached its conclusion for the permit. This permit was our ERP permit from the FDEP. She stated that the Sovereign Lands permit gave permission due to the fact that Little Estero CWA was set aside as state lands without the approval of homeowners, so that the CWA area, if disputed in court, the most likely outcome is that the CWA would be dissolved and the state would lose its rights to that area. That is not where we want to go. We are just looking for a minor structure to gain back our beach access to the Gulf. The first thing that Eddie and I did when we...
Before you go, I know you had this at the prior hearing. I was shown this before the last hearing. Again, not new evidence. I'd ask that this be stricken from our record.
I think more importantly is, how does this relate to, frankly, any of the proceedings? Ownership of the CWA is not any of a stated criteria in your special exception section of the Land Development Code. Whether or not a person owns a portion of what is now the CWA, or the state owns it, if it's a property owner who is seeking a dune walkover such as this, under our code, whether they own down to the dry sand or to the wet sand or not, they have to obtain a special exception. And what you apply is the criteria in your code for special exception, not ownership.
So, John, can we strike this?
If that's the majority of the council is to disregard it and not make it part of the record, you have the right to do so.
One of the comments was made that this dune walkover, because it's not a public walkover, did not meet the criteria of the special exception. And I'm here talking about who actually, whether that's private land or public land.
You have presented as evidence in a notebook session of prior to the last hearing and did not present at that hearing.
Roxanne is going by strict procedure. You had possession of this. I hadn't seen it at the last meeting, but you had possession of it. You could have presented it. You didn't.
To address the conclusion that at least one of the members came to, that the only kind of public benefit for this structure is public access. One of the public benefits that has been identified, one of the reasons for denial that was given, was that it is protective of the CWA not to have this dune walkover. And so we would be remiss as applicants not to say, not only are you not protecting the CWA, you are jeopardizing the CWA by forcing the homeowners in this area to litigate the validity of the CWA in order to obtain access to the beach, that they have a title issue.
Ms. Petrick, thank you very much for that feisty little comment you made, but,
I'm trying to connect the dots.
oh,
For the binder to the
again, don't underestimate our dot connecting ability either. So, but hold on just one second. So, procedurally, again, this isn't new. So, do you all want to allow it or not allow it?
No.
You do not wish to allow it. I'm going to, what?
Yes. Going to either come out here, Madam Chair, or
I
it's going to
believe
come
me,
out
Ray,
at the
I
next
know.
hearing.
I
Why don't we
understand.
just-
Comes out at another hearing, that's the place it should come out. This
Exactly.
hearing is limited. in its
Exactly.
So we
Exactly.
forfeit our
Exactly.
ability to decide here on Fort Myers Beach, what's
No.
going to be decided in some court, some future date.
Ms. Petrick, we're not going to allow this. Could you go on?
Yeah, it can be removed from the binder that the
Thank you.
clerk has. It's,
Mr. Kramer, could you go on, please?
just for the record, it's tab 13 that you're wanting removed.
Thank you. From strictly the procedure of the rehearing. That was very difficult. Okay, Mr. Kramer, thank you.
So, the point, I guess the point being is, and it's unfortunate that it comes down to procedural, because it's Eddie Rude, my interest was never to bring ownership into the issue of this boardwalk. In fact, we didn't bring it up because we were hiding it, all right? We didn't want the idea that the CWA could actually be dissolved.
Mr. Kramer, I appreciated very much the time with you and Mr. Rude yesterday, other than the fact that he didn't offer us water until an hour in. I appreciated that very much. But procedurally, the ownership of the CWA is irrelevant to the special exception application of the boardwalk. So we have to keep this in terms of the relevance to the special exception. And I appreciate your sentiment on it very much. Ms. Petrick?
The witness, and I have no further witnesses. As I've indicated, we've attempted to be as brief as possible. And as you've said, this is a complicated hearing because there are issues of evidence and there are issues of whether or not facts have been applied consistently with how your code actually reads. And the dune and dune vegetation language is a beautiful example of how your code actually reads and what was told to you by Mr. Schutz. As I heard it, they weren't the same thing. And, the same thing that you're seeing with the idea that it's a combination dune versus boardwalk over, it's that same idea that, we've attempted to identify in the request for rehearing places where we think your code has not been indicated to you in a way that is consistent with its plain language. I'm not going to restate everything that was in the request for rehearing, but I would ask for you to consider what your LPA members have indicated to you about what they believe the public benefit is of this document. Consider what the special conditions are that the state has placed on this that address in every detail each and every one of your locational criteria. It goes down the line in neat order of everything that your code requires. That's what the special conditions in the CCCL are. You may not like this dune walkover, but it does in fact meet the letter of your criteria. And part of the proof of that is the fact that after this hearing is over, you are amending the language that would have allowed for us to do this in the first place if this were not so politically contentious. So we would ask for you to please consider the technical aspects that we have raised, both in the original PowerPoint and in the request for a hearing, I'm not going to verbalize them here, because this application does meet the technical letter of your code, and it would resolve a contentious battle that has been hundreds of thousands of dollars and a lot of time and attention that y'all could spend on things that you care about. We know you care about the CWA. Imagine what you could have spent 100, 200, 300,
I'm
whatever
going
it
to
is.
stop you, Ms. Petrick, and thank you very much for your comments. Just so you know, whether there were 5 people or 500 people in this room, the political correctness or incorrectness of this decision, I guarantee you that the 5 members of this board would make the same decision regardless of the political pressure that was weighed upon us. So rest assured of that. Thank you. Do you have any final comments? Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Staff, do you have any comments?
You can choose to listen to staff, but at some point in time, I would suggest that this council go through the binder that's been submitted to you and determine what portions of it you are going to accept into the record and which you are going to exclude, because there are some other sections or other tabs that relate to the testimony that you've already stricken and the email that you've stricken. But we can go through that at some point in time after you've heard from staff and from the public, decide what portions of the binder you're going to accept or not.
Mr. Herring, can it be identified as a proffer to the extent that it is not accepted in the record?
I have no objection to that.
Thank you.
So does staff have any final comments on this?
Yes, staff, I do believe has some comments, and as you may recall, at the last hearing, staff was represented by outside counsel that have been assisting in this matter since prior to my becoming your town attorney. An attorney from that same law firm by the name of Pamela Hatley is here present to assist staff with their presentation to the extent necessary. Staff does have the right under the Quasi's procedures to ask questions of the witnesses who've already testified if they so wish. Otherwise, they can make their presentation and then you all can open up public hearing.
The same rules are going to apply to you, Jason. It has to be new material, something that wasn't presented or discoverable in the first hearing. And good morning.
Good morning, Jason Green, Community Development. I was simply going to say you've had our documentation, so there's nothing new related to that, so I won't go over any of that. You have the staff report that was presented in the previous testimony. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Hatley if she wants to add anything related to process or other procedures, and I'll that from the staff's perspective.
I have a question of Jason. My understanding, although I was not included in these communications, I have heard that communication was made to staff of something new, that a condo development on the beach offered access to these folks. And that's new to me, but I was not made aware of the details, so I think that is something new.
I have not had any involvement.
You have not?
Other
Okay.
than maybe there might have been an email of some sort, but I have not investigated that and hadn't had any coordination with the owners or anybody else on that issue. There might have been some other stuff.
Mr. Hernstadt, you seem
Council,
aware?
I was contacted by property and about that, and I said that it'd be important for them to be here today and to address council on that point. So I hope they followed up and are here and available to make a proffer if that is their intention.
Okay, so there was an offer made. The rumor that I heard was not.
No, it's my understanding that there is a condominium that is, that has an easement that, or access that, they told me on the phone that they were gonna come here today and address to the council, and they may or may not be here.
Okay.
Ma'am, you need to come back to if you're going to object to something, but
I just want for the record for it to be made clear that an offer has not been made to these applicants. They have not been made aware of any kind of offer from someone of access.
I'm going to hand this to Mr. Herring. This was actually recorded in and it is a grant of easement to the public. So if you'll just give that to Mr. Herron, and maybe we can make a copy so you can look at it. Through the Castle Beach property. Thank you, Ms. Petrick. Thank you. Yes, ma'am? Good morning.
Good morning. And I'm with the firm Collins Law Group. I've been working as of counsel with Martha Collins for some time. I was involved with this case from the very beginning. I'm very familiar with the issues in this case. I assisted Ms. Collins in processes before it came to this, before the council in this posture. This request is, of course, as you know, for a special exception. That requires the town council to look at the town code and the criteria in the town code and apply those to the facts of the case and make a decision. As staff has well analyzed in their report, the town code sets out several criteria that have to be applied, and the town must look at those criteria in this context. It is the applicant's burden to come forward with competent substantial evidence in the record to demonstrate that it meets those criteria. If it doesn't, the town mustn't grant the special exception, and that is the process. I believe the town is very well aware of that process. The staff report, as I said, went into an analysis of the criteria that are listed in section 34.88 of the Land Development Code.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Just so to sum up.
Madam Chair, just 1 second, please. Counselor didn't state, she stated what firm she was with. She did not state who her client or clients are.
Us. I'm Pamela Jo Hatley.
We know that, but other people maybe not know that.
I'm here for the Martha Collins Law Group. We're representing the staff in this process.
Just
Staff of the
town of
in the town of Fort Myers Beach. We have represented the town of Fort Myers Beach through the proceedings in other contexts.
And do you have anything new to add to the record for this rehearing?
No. In fact, I'd point out that there is nothing new in this hearing today presented by the applicant. And so I think that staff's analysis was spot on.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open the public comment. I'm going to ask you all, please, we have 8 public hearings today. In the spirit of kindness and generosity, if you will please make your comments brief and try not to repeat comments. Yes,
Mayor, if I may,
you may.
have approximately 21.
I've asked to speak. So 21 people times 3
Is over an hour.
It's public comment, it's a public hearing, so we have to. Yeah.
I just want to clarify.
John, do you want to comment on that? The newness of the public testimony? Oh, Lord. Roger, can we make a copy? Did you make a copy of that?
Yes, I did.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, you just wait. Sit down. Sit down.
We're in public.
Sit down. We're in public comment. You'll be able to come back up. Don't worry. How'd you like that? It was very my father. I apologize for that. Some of those things are just deeply ingrained. Okay. But it's not good.
The general public is free to say whatever they are. This is the opportunity to say, to make their comments. However, with that said, the issue here before you is whether or not there's any new evidence or a misapplication of the law that took place at the prior hearing. So the comments, in order to be considered by this council and to be relevant to this council's consideration of the item before you, need to deal with those issues, or should deal with those issues.
That's going to be so hard for you all.
I know. I know. As the decision maker, you give weight to what you hear as it relates to the issues before you, and ultimately make a decision. But the testimony for you all to be able to consider it must be relevant to the issue before you, which is the request for rehearing.
Do you all understand that? Nod your heads, because I don't think you do. You do? So the rule is that any comment in this rehearing has to be relevant to the request for the rehearing, not simply save the snowy plovers. It has to be relevant to the request for the rehearing. So please don't be angry if I interrupt you and say, thank you very much. That means I'm going to ask you to step aside, okay? Because our goal here is to keep our record very clean with new information based on the rehearing request. Possible. Okay. Do you want to break? Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break here before we start the public comment. Thank you. Ugh. definitely, because these microphones, I don't know what they're doing. Thank you all very much. Just going to wait a second here for our town attorney and our town manager to, doesn't matter. You know what? We're going to reopen the public hearing. Mr. Grant, I'm going to start with you since I asked you to wait, and thank you very much for that courtesy.
Thank you. I'll be brief. As I said, I've been selling real estate in the area for 30
Mr. Grant,
years.
would you just identify yourself
Oh.
again, please? Thank you.
Douglas Grant. Those dunes were rearranged in the 04-05 hurricanes. Then we had the real estate collapse. And then when we came out of the collapse, I would say beachfront, all of Fort Myers Beach like this. Unfortunately, the 8,000 block has remained stagnant. Probably the best illustration I can give you, this is a home at 8180. Investor came in and built this home. It is pending sale. It's been on the market for 2 years. This same home in the 3,000 block sold last year in less than a week. And this home that's pending on 8180 will sell over $1 million less than that home in the 3,000 block. Unfortunately, that's the kind of property value hit that the residents there in the 8,000 block have endured. I don't know, maybe there's something you can do for those folks because, I mean, a lot of this was out of their control. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sharon, would you like to come up next? Michelle, do you have a list of the speakers? Do we have a list?
I do. I'm working to try and get it up on the monitors.
Alrighty.
Seems to,
Well, just so because I knew Sharon was next. Go ahead, Sharon. Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sharon Hegstrom. I'm the current president at Castle Beach Condominium at 8300 Estero Boulevard. I am here to represent our entire community and the concerns over the permitting of the boardwalk and how it would adversely affect the Castle Beach community as we sit on our beautiful beach. The boardwalk would be in our direct line of sight, and we know it would be a terrible precedent for the town to allow this to happen. Just a quick background about Castle Beach. We have been in public-private relationship with the state of Florida, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and the Audubon Society for years. For the past 10 years, we at Castle Beach have allowed our beach to be roped off completely, except for a center walkway to the water. And it's an inconvenience to our owners and our renters, but we feel that it is well worth the sacrifice. And we really feel it would be sad if the boardwalks are granted. It would have an adverse effect on the wildlife in the lagoon and the beach. But I'm also here today to present an alternative to the boardwalk. In 1992, Castle Beach entered into an agreement with Laguna Shores, community that runs Estero Boulevard back to the Back Bay. We established a right-of-way on the west side of our property for members of this community only to access the beach. January 27th of this year, our condominium association at Castle Beach and the board of directors authorized me as their representative to negotiate an agreement as was done with Laguna Shores. Today, I have with me the survey and the easement agreement that was granted to Laguna Shores. This is just a short walk from the property requesting the boardwalk, less than 1/4 of a mile. We hope that you, the town council, in your deliberations on this matter, will consider what I have put forward as the alternative to allowing the boardwalk not to be considered. Thank you for letting me talk to you today. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Hegstrom. Appreciate it.
Okay. And I will give the copies to
Michelle. Thank you very
Michelle.
much.
There you go.
Who's the next?
speaker is Norm Rowe.
Norm Rowe. And who's going to follow Norm, Michelle?
Thank you. Followed by Sylvia Rowe.
And Sylvia, if you would...
I have no idea who she is.
Okay, well, we'll introduce you. Sylvia, would you go ahead and come up here? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm Norm Rowe, 70 Boulevard. I'm for the boardwalk. I think birds and people could live and coexist in harmony. And there's a lot of other jurisdiction in the area, like Corkscrew Swamp, that has 2 miles of boardwalk. How about Ding Darling? They allow cars and bikes on their property over there. How about Carl Johnson State Park? They allow trams and bicycles to go to the beach. These guys all they want is a small walkway so they can enjoy the beach. It's pretty straightforward for me, so that's my opinion.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to meet your husband?
Yes, well, my name is, and live down at 7700 Estero Boulevard, and, we've owned there for over 30 years, actually, so we've been there a long time, and we've seen a lot of changes in the beach and so forth. But it's hard for me, really, to let you know how I feel about what's going on, but I understand exactly what these residents want. And if you walk down there to see what's down there, I mean, it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful little walkway that they're hoping to have, and it's really, what I'm thinking is it's the same kind of a structure that you would see, in a lot of other places in Florida, that they're allowing the same sort of structures in these environmentally protected areas all over Florida. And in right here in Fort Myers Beach, and also, like my husband said, Corkscrew Swamp, the Audubon Society there. And then the other one thing that I wanted to say was that, I know that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Agency, they had, I read anyway, that they had said the dunes can be protected better if they're actually, you have the walkover. They're saying that there's more of a protection for the dune itself. And this is what the FDEP had said. So that would be actually a public benefit for this walkway. So I just wanted you to consider those facts and think about it. And I don't know if any of you have ever walked down there, but it's just really beautiful down there. And I'm hoping that something positive can come up for these residents, because I do believe that it would be a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Deborah Hampson, you are next, and followed by Sally Page. So if Sally could come to this microphone, so you're ready. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me today.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Debbie Hampson. I'm a 34-year resident of the area. I have been an owner here in 2 different properties on the beach and enjoy every bit of it. I like birds. I like turtles. I like reasonableness. It's been a lot of history, and I recently became interested in this whole issue because I have neighbors getting involved in this. So it's my understanding that many hearings before, the state administrative law judge, the town of Fort Myers Beach filed against them, and the town lost every lawsuit. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be a reasonable assumption that if there were any danger to the environment of the birds, that the state administrative law judge, the applicants? So wouldn't we rather see people walking over the birds rather than walking on them or in their nests? Living on the beach, I see the people traffic, so you can't miss it. It's super busy right now. So many people traversing through the mangroves, and they're trying to find a way to get there. And I think that's all our neighbor is asking. I know hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent pursuing this. rather see that be placed elsewhere. I'm just hoping that in this decision, it's based rather on true facts rather than feelings. I know we all feel for many things, but I'd rather see it be more fact-based and based on the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning. Hopes that I don't get the hook.
You might. I've known you long enough to give you the hook.
I am here in favor of the footbridge. My name is Sally Page, and I am the president of Shamron Beach Condominium Association at 7650 Estero Boulevard. I have a couple of other people here in Shamron also that are representing our condominium. Our 54-unit beachside building faces the slowly receding pond that divides us from what the state has determined to be the CWA. And believe me, I'm not going to argue that point here right now. As an owner of my second floor condominium for 33 years, I was here before the CWA became the CWA, when the area was no more than just a blip of a mound of sand surrounded by waters on all sides. Over the years, and dependent on the growth of brush on this land, birds come and go. They come when the sand is pristine and white, devoid of vegetation and greenery, and they go when it is not. They have been gone now for several years. And who can blame them? White, flat, naked sand has been overrun with undulating mounds of vegetation getting taller and denser every year. It is not a place where birds feel comfortable with the prey stalking them and the greenery all around them. At one time, the residents of Shamron enjoyed looking out their windows to dozens of pelicans, plovers, other migratory birds taking up residence on the sandbar, and it is no longer the case. While I appreciate the enthusiasm of members of the Audubon Club and others to protect the birds from intrusion of any kind, I believe the town must now come to the realization that the birds have moved on, and so should they. In Mr. Rood's case, the same is true. The area he wishes to build a dune walkover, which I understand is not in the CWA, is much more congested and has much more vegetation than ours. I understand at the last hearing, a number of persons in the audience held up pictures of the beautiful birds that we were lucky to see at various times in various places on the sandbar on the CWA. But now, frankly, the only place we see them is in their photographs. Where we live, this is what we see. And I'm going to give copies to the clerk, hopefully that she will pass them on to you. Didn't take us any particular time, any particular week, any particular month. There are just no birds there.
Well, now I will send you out the door. You have to let people say what they want to say.
Yeah,
Go
because
ahead,
you know
Sally.
what? I look at them every day. If there are birds, they're hiding very carefully in the greenery there, and I think they're smarter than we are as to know where to go so that they do not become victims of prey. The footbridge that Mr. Rood and his neighbor can enjoy their property deeded them to the Gulf of Mexico is not unreasonable and should not be denied. It is a simple request backed up by years of his neighbor and he legally dotting their I's and crossing their T's. They are not asking for something that has not already been approved for by various governing bodies of the state and federal government. That work is done. And now I believe it's up to the consul to put the final period on the walkover by granting them what he needs to apply for the permit to build it. Not to do so, I fear, will result in an unnecessary lawsuit against the town that will do more to spend taxpayers' dollar for no reasons, because the outcome will be favorable to Mr. Rood, as it should. I ask the town to consider if it is worth it, when I believe his ask is reasonable, legal, and not a danger to the birds, as he has proven. The
I'll give you the hook now, Sally.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Okay,
I
thank you.
appreciate
I thought
your
I'd
comments.
have a little extra time because of the audience, but I appreciate it. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Sally.
I'm going to pass this on if you take a look at some of the pictures.
Next speaker is Paul Page, who will be followed by Penny Jarrett.
Mayor Saracenia, members of the council, good morning. My name is Paul Page, and I bought here in 1987. I have been a resident of Florida and of this town since that time. One of the reasons that I bought here was because there were so many birds. And I agree their population has reduced greatly because of the growth that's come up on the island. I'm more concerned, though, with the precedent that you have, you may make here today. When I bought my condominium, My deed said that I owned to the Gulf of Mexico. Being a northerner at the time, I thought, well, it's stupid. What's that about? Why isn't there some specific marker? And the answer was because the Gulf of Mexico keeps moving. Well, since that time, the land has developed out in front of our condominium, and because of that, it has moved further out. But then through rules and regulations, that land apparently doesn't belong to us anymore. And that concerns me greatly. And it's a battle yet to be fought, but I'm worried about the precedent that you may set by not allowing that bridge because it starts that process. I also have a document here from an individual who is a friend of the concern that's asked me to read that to you without objection.
So long as you're in your time, Mr. Page, please go ahead.
Okay. This is coming from Marty McLaughlin, and he says, I am, this email from me at 8044 Estero Boulevard, since Marty could not attend the meeting today. He says, I am down here this week. Alice and I heard about the hearing today, so we went. Obviously, there has been no reschedule. It has been rescheduled to 2018. But the council still allowed a public speaking segment regarding the dune access today. There were roughly 20 to 25 people that were apparently contesting the access, several of which were going to speak. One person did speak in favor. Obviously, all of what was spoken at this hearing was considered off the record and was not a formal meeting. All were encouraged to come back for the 2/18 meeting. Just wanted to let you know that the people that spoke against were deeply concerned about how the added foot traffic created by this new proposed private access, which landing is adjacent to the Little Estero Critical Wildlife Area. You may or may not know that these people largely represented two condominium communities. One addressed at 7500 Estero Boulevard and the other one at 7400 Estero Boulevard. This property is adjacent to all of that. And he and his wife are simply saying, if I may paraphrase, that it's adjacent to the critical wildlife area, and he believes that because it is private, it will have no real impact on the critical wildlife area.
Thank you, Mr.
Now I hand this to the clerk for
Yes.
distribution.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's nice to see you again.
Mayor-
Jarrett, Michelle, I've lost all my speakers again.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm working on trying to remedy that.
All right.
But we have Penny Jarrett, and she will be followed by Billy Beach.
Mr. Beach? On
Jarrett.
deck.
I want to thank the council for denying this special exception. I would like to bring up the idea that in FWC, in a letter dated July 20th, 2016, that development of this proposed boardwalk within or immediately adjacent to the CWA would preclude the use of the habitat within the footprint of the structure and would also fundamentally change the character of the habitat for many meters on either side of the structure. I've heard it mentioned several times today, it's a small structure. It is the length of a football field. This is not a small structure. It is significant. It will significantly obstruct what is a pristine, critical habitat and the view that so many of us enjoy, and it will disrupt the path that the birds fly and also bring in potentially more predators. This is really for a very select small group of people that are looking for their own private access while they already have access going north. There is this footpath that's been mentioned today, and there is access at 3 different points going north that the folks can get just like everybody else. A footpath is going to have less impact than this large structure that is a permanent structure that is there and is very viewable. I want to just mention one other thing because I think tourism is such a core piece of our community, and
I happened to be doing a bird survey, and there are birds down there, very much so. But Danielle and Tony Gabbard from St. Paul, Minnesota, vacationing here, the most favorite part of the weekend has been the wildlife we see. We are really at a crux where we set a precedent where other people want boardwalks, and we start marring the beach all the way along. And I think it would be a disservice to the community, a disservice to our tourists, and a disservice to the wildlife especially that depend on this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny.
Bill Beach, who is followed by Wendy Herron.
So Wendy, if you'll come up to this microphone, and go ahead, Bill.
Okay, my name is Bill Veach, but my name was Bill Veach before the first hearing, so I don't know if that's new information.
Only you and Gail asked me the same question. Yes, that's new information. Good, thank you, Bill.
All right, well, the first contention I have is, and I think it's a real weak point of their argument, that's why they keep going over it, is that, yeah, I've heard people call this a bridge, a boardwalk, and a dune walkover. I think it is not a dune walkover. It's not a dune walkover by design or by intent. In all their statements, they want to go over the water. They're not really, they rake. They're not really preservationists for the dunes. And it stops before the primary dune. The purpose for a dune walkover in the guidance by the state is to protect the primary dune. The primary dune is the first vegetated dune you see. This boardwalk stops before that and will actually have traffic focused on the primary dune. And so not by intent and not by design. It's an important distinction because dune walkovers are a privileged type of structure. You have major and minor structures, and minor structures are all meant to be expendable. We have a deck, it's a minor structure. We weren't allowed to go past the CC, the 1978 coastal construction line, even though it's a minor structure. If you allow this boardwalk to go through as a minor structure, it means you're pretty much opening up not just other boardwalks, but why wouldn't someone be able to have a gazebo or a deck built out over the dunes? And I could see, a disco gazebo going up somewhere. Who knows? Maybe in front of my house. So that's an important point, and there's plenty of references in the chapters on the beaches and coastal systems, the rules and procedures. The second point is, they explained to me. I visited Monday, Mr. Rood, and there were birds in the lagoon then when I saw him. But he said how they changed the mean high tide line changed. They couldn't legally walk along the bank of that lagoon anymore. And so their legal beach access was removed when that happened. In reality, they never had a legal dry beach access. Once they got around the lagoon, when they get to the open raked area, that was private property. They were trespassing. With the addition of this Castle Beach access, this would be the best dry beach access they've had without building a boardwalk. So as far as beach access, they're claiming loss by the loss of a beach access. It really doesn't exist. They have the opportunity to have better beach access, dry and legal, than they've had. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Wendy Herron. I live mid-island on Sable Drive. The weekend before last, I decided to view the area in question so I could see for myself what the issue was. I walked the area in front of the Texas houses until I could reach the shoreline. It took me a little over 7 to 8 minutes to reach the shoreline, but only because I stopped to take pictures of all the birds that I saw along the way. Many of them threatened species, which I won't go into, no snowy plovers. I also met numerous visitors who commented on how remarkable and relatively undisturbed the critical wildlife area was. The amount of people I saw walking through on the existing paths did not seem to have a problem having to walk a bit to reach the shoreline. I did take the time to speak with several of them concerning this, and they remarked that the brief walk was delightful, and viewing the wading and shorebirds made the walk even shorter. To the Texas owners, I would hope that a 5 to 6 minute walk to the shoreline is not a deterrent to your visitors. Lastly, council members, I would like to say if this boardwalk goes through, It's a dangerous precedent that you're setting. Others will soon follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Next speaker is Thomas Breton, followed by Leroy Cooper.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Breton. Mr. Cooper?
I'm going to be as fast as
Hold
I
on,
can.
hold on, hold on, hold on. Hold on, thank you, though. Mr. Cooper? Okay, Michelle, call the next one.
Brad Cornell after Leroy
Mr.
Cooper.
Cornell? Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
As fast as I can, but
You'd give those to Michelle?
I would like to give them. First one is the property.
Don't, whatever you've got to say everything on a microphone, so wait till you get back. That's okay.
First picture is a picture of the, am I ready to go yet?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay. The first picture is a picture from 7400 Estero Boulevard. The people who don't want the walkway spoke against keeping the CWA very private. The second picture is from 7500 Estero Boulevard. These were all taken after the meeting. You can see they have beautiful beach access, and they are trying to deny beach access to other people. The other thing they talked about was predators. I think the gentleman here with the green shirt spoke about predators. The entire CWA is accessible by land, both at the north end, the south end, and in the center. To say that a predator is now going to find this bridge and enter the CWA, I think is a little bit crazy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I think it's wrong. As far as the number of birds go, I would like to Roger Torrey Peterson visited the site years before the CWA was established and declared it possibly the best place in the world to photograph shorebirds. We used to see photographers there all the time. The photographers have voted with their feet. They have left. We used to look out our window. There was 10 people on our property laying in the water with cameras taking pictures. The last 5 years, I haven't seen one camera. I haven't seen one tripod. And yes, there are birds in there, but as far as being the best birding area in the world, no way. The predators, that ain't gonna happen. They're already there. And if you read the paper a few years back, they were talking about predation for the raccoons on the turtles. They said that the raccoons don't go out to the beach anymore. They're all sitting there in the dumpsters eating pizza and spaghetti. As far as the highest concentration of wildlife goes, where we found it was in front of the Lani Kai. And my neighbor and I walked the entire length, 1.37 miles of the CWA the other day. We counted 7 birds in the CWA, and they talked about several hundred birds. Yes, we did find them. The first one was 708 feet beyond on the south end of the beach. And if you really look at the CWA, there's very, very few birds. The birds are at the very south end of the beach, and that's private property, according to the lady from Castle Beach. I was called, bye-bye.
I hope you'll come visit more often. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Brad Cornell on behalf of Audubon Florida and Audubon Western Everglades. Audubon opposes granting this special exception for the 300-foot boardwalk and bridge near the Little Estero Island CWA, Critical Wildlife Area. The habitat and wildlife here are so unique. This is one of only 2 places where we have large numbers of shorebirds nesting in all of Lee and Collier County. That Audubon hires a full-time biologist, he's here today, Adam DeNovo, a summer shorebird anchor steward, and trains dozens of volunteers, many of whom are here also wearing green and blue shirts. We also collaborate with the Castle Beach condos, with FWC, with the Turtle Time, Eve Haverfield's group and volunteers, and I've seen some of them here today. And so this is an important collaboration for a very unique and important area. Couple of points. First, the reasonable alternative that Castle Beach Condo Association is offering is something that we really need to be considering today. I hope that the applicants will accept that offer, and that solves all the problems that we hear today. Second, it was asserted that FWC has never objected to nor denied this permit. Well, they don't have the authority to deny a state application for this structure, but they have repeatedly expressed concerns over the threats that this proposed 300-foot boardwalk and bridge poses to the critical wildlife area and the imperiled species around it. And this is because of its unique importance. And I want to additionally note that our biologist has found Wilson's plovers, which nest in the very kind of habitat that this boardwalk is proposed to go into and over. So Wilson's plovers are a species that we know so very little about. It probably is a threatened or an endangered species. We're trying to learn more about it now, and they nest right there. And finally, I want to point out that in contrast to the state and the DEP, the town has the primary responsibility to guard the interests of its citizens and the unique nature of their island home. The town made the right decision in November to deny this special exception to build a private boardwalk bridge impacting the critical wildlife area. We strongly support a confirmation of that decision in today's rehearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Ken Drent, followed by Mary Rose Spalletta.
Ken Dren. Also, could you raise your hands if you've got an empty seat beside you? There's one. Folks outside, there are some empty seats in here if you'd like to come in. There's one up here, sir. There's a couple over there on the other side. Yeah. Oh, yeah, think about that. There's some other seats if you guys want to come in. Come on in. Come on in. No, you don't want to? Okay. We allow coffee. All right. Yes, sir. Sorry, go ahead.
Good morning. My name hearing many complaints of how this walkover will hurt the birds, and I do not agree with these complaints. I believe it's safe to say the actual wood structure itself is not harmful to birds. If so, the thousands of boardwalks built up and down the Florida coast would have pictures and documentation of how a boardwalk structure can hurt birds. These pictures and documents are nowhere to be found. As a matter of fact, the Audubon Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, which is the loudest opposition to all this, has a 2.25-mile boardwalk meandering through it with 100,000 visitors per year. Now, I've gotten this information from their website, so they also provide a boardwalk bird list with over 2 pages of nearly 200 different birds that you can look for at their sanctuary. I wonder how it's possible for that many visitors a year to coexist with the birds and wildlife at Corkscrew, but the proposed walkover is going to be detrimental to the birds on our beach. I'm not seeing the connection, how this boardwalk is destructive to any birds. In contrast, this boardwalk will greatly reduce foot traffic through the graded sand that is east of our neighborhood. Graded sand is actually the current nesting area for the plovers and terns. If you are protecting the CWA, then I say help us protect these birds by approving this special application. I'd like to close by saying please make your decision today based on facts and the law, not feelings, and approve this walkover. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Rose?
Mary Rose, Ellen Vaughn,
Ellen?
will be followed by Terry Monroe.
Terry, get ready.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for letting me speak. And I want you to know that I came with a full page, but I've just crossed out a whole lot here and will try and only make new points.
Thank you, Mary Rose.
First of all, facts, not feelings. And although I do get emotional, I think I only try and present facts. First of all, we have a situation here where we have some property owners who've decided that they and their renters can't walk 3.5 minutes to a beach access. Number 2, it's the same area. It is the only area on our beach suitable for endangered and threatened shorebirds to feel safe enough to mate and rest their chicks. Number 3, this is the same and the only area where last season we had the first green turtle nest in over 30 years on Fort Myers Beach. This is a wonderful thing. The only reason she came in there is because it's relatively quiet and dark. Number 4, according to the Fort Myers Beach Comp Plan, we have a responsibility to to protect the quality of life for our residents, owners, and guests. The critical wildlife area here on Fort Myers Beach enhances our quality of life. And therefore, at the risk of repeating myself, I will say that it behooves us to disallow private beach boardwalks. Thanks for listening. Anybody have a question?
Thank you very much, Mary Rose.
You are welcome.
Ellen.
Ellen Vaughn, and I am one of those people that live at 7500 Estero Boulevard. And I will, I will address the council by pointing out that you are dealing with a classic issue of rights in conflict. You have people that want one thing, and then you have a number of people that want another. And you must split the baby, and I don't envy you that position. But I also would like to follow up by saying that I understand this to be a rehearing, meaning that new information was to be presented. From my understanding, no new information has come forward. So I would assume that the decision that was made by this council during the previous consideration of this matter should hold. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Job of following the rules. I just want
Congratulate you on that.
The next speaker is Terry Monroe.
Terry
followed by
Monroe.
Gail Crabtree Pagoli.
Well, Gail will blow it, but let's see. Gail, come on up, Gail.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For 2 years, but for 13 years, I lived down in 8030. So I've experienced what they're talking about with the birds and the lagoon. And we had to go through a lot of restrictions to even do a type of trimming. And these gentlemen have went through this with the, let me see if I got the FDEP, the U.S. Wildlife, all this stuff, and got the permits. I don't see how we can, let this supersede what they've already done. And, the birds, personally, I don't think the birds really going to care much about this. I'll probably get hate mail for this. Probably just going to sit on the rail and do their thing. I don't want to see the guys, they shouldn't be denied their beach access. I'm in favor, let him put it in. It's not going to be like a bunch of boat docks where everybody goes around and this goes viral. I don't think that's going to be the issue. So I'm in favor of the council, giving them their special exemption. They went through all the hoops, let them have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Gail?
Boy, is Gail Crabtree Pergoli, 7500 Estero Boulevard, going to break the rules? Yes. I want to thank all of the members of Town Council for all the studies and all the hours and all the listening and all the reading that you have done on this issue. I can speak from fact. We've all seen it presented here. I agree with Ellen Vaughn that no new evidence has been presented today. I do live in the Little Estero Island critical wildlife area. I am passionate about the birds. I don't mind if I wade through the lagoon. I do not have tons of money. To allow these applicants to bring their money, bring their attorneys, and to say that they are losing rental income, as Amy Lowry testified to in November, and to say that their values are going down and shouldn't the town be concerned, I think is absolutely awful. I value the birds. The reason I moved to 7500 Estero Boulevard is because of the birds. The birds still exist. They are in my lagoon. I am on the beach every day or viewing it from my condo. There are birds that exist. Just last spring, FWC came in and I had a killdeer's nest right outside of the condo. So it steps up to the condo in the scrub, and we allowed them to rope that off. We allow them access through Riviera Club so that they don't have to carry their sticks and their string so far. I'm very passionate about the birds. And in closing, I would like to say, I've been called many things, but I have certainly never been called comical. Because I'm not.
Thank you, Gail.
Next speaker is Gloria Abramoff, followed by Mike Huffman.
Gloria, if you'll come here, and Mike, if you'll come to this. Do we have him in the room? Okay,
Or the next would be,
okay.
was Gloria sworn?
I believe this is the witness who wasn't sworn in.
Gloria, would you raise your right hand, please?
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Witness has been sworn.
Thank you.
Okay. Because of the trying to speak to new things, I should probably just throw out the little speech I have. I may zip through it a little bit. It's really about stewardship. It's about living on a beautiful island, about feeling fortunate that you do, about the responsibility that comes with that good fortune, and that is stewardship. There's been a 37% decline in the shorebird population. It's been pointed out there are only 2 locations up to Tampa where there is good habitat. Joy and a blessing that we have it. The fact that you look out your window and don't see all the birds you used to see is not a good thing and a reason to destroy the rest of the habitat. Opposite. Obviously, I feel strongly. I just want to say we need to be honorable stewards of this land and of the wildlife that depends on it. A walkway for the convenience of a handful of houses that can do irreparable damage to this area that the hundreds of birds rely on for resting, feeding, breeding, bird, and where's the unconscionable. And so thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Dan, you're next. Following Dan, Michelle?
I have no one else.
Okay.
Good morning. Daniel Hughes, 270 Randy Lane. I'm here representing, well, I'm representing myself, but I'm also a current member of the LPA. And which on October 16, 2019, all 7 members of the LPA unanimously recommended approval of this special exception. Every witness that appeared at that hearing favored the project. No witnesses opposed the project. We specifically found that it met the conditions and criteria of the comp plan and the land development code. We attached 2 conditions. One, that they would restore any vegetation damaged by the installation, and that's required under another provision of the comp plan anyway. And that the applicants would enter into an agreement with their abutting property owners, 7 of whom also were in the same position of not having access to the beach except across that area, that they would enter into an agreement that they could utilize that crosswalk and a provision put in it that they would not be able to apply for a boardwalk on their own volition, thus limiting it to just that one crosswalk. Several provisions of the comp plan, which I was instrumental in drafting as an original member of the LPA, are relevant, and I quote briefly. The coastal management elements provides dune walkovers should be constructed where they do not exist. I emphasize the word should, not may, but should be constructed where they do not exist. In the conservation element, policy 6E1 states, for all public beach areas within the town, state-approved dune walkover, this was state-approved, over structures shall be required at appropriate crossing points. These same structures are also encouraged wherever pedestrians will be crossing dune areas. Again, shall be required, not may. Okay. As to the hearing before the administrative law judge, the findings before the administrative law judge directly contradict all of the remarks that have been made in favor of this by the members of by the Audubon people and so forth. And I would like to point out some particular provisions from those proceedings. The permit issued by the Department of Environmental Permit finds, as a conclusion of law, that the project will result in no significant adverse impact to the beach dune areas or to adjacent properties, that the work is not expected to adversely impact nesting turtles, their hatchlings, or their habitat. And in the consolidated final order of the administrative law judge in May of 2019.
Dan, I'm going to stop you because we do have all of that as part of our packet.
Okay, well, I just hope that it's directly contradictory to remarks that have been made at other public comment, and that's why I'm bringing it up again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Yes, sir. And the gentleman who raised your hand in the back, if you'll go ahead and come up as well. Thank you very much.
I can hear it.
All right, what?
I'm going to step out.
Okay. Good morning. Sir, were you sworn in?
Yes.
You were. Both of you were. Yes, go ahead, sir.
I'm here. Couldn't be here today because of business, and asked me to present this statement. So, I have lived in the Grand Old Man subdivision full-time for over 20 years. When I moved here, the CWA did not exist between my property and the Gulf. The beach was a short walk directly from my property. I have lost my beach access as applicants and the rest of my neighbors. I walk the beach almost every day, and I'm very familiar with the location of the nesting birds and other wildlife in the area. I have attended many meetings with the FWC and the DEP in regards to the nesting birds and wildlife in the CWA. I fully support their efforts to protect the birds in this area. I have listened to and considered both sides of the issues brought before the council today and feel that I need to speak out. I have worked with the FDEP and the FWC for 2 years to acquire the permits to perform the mangrove trimmings and the CWA. I know that from experience, the total focus of these agencies is to protect the environment and the birds. From this experience and exhausting pruning process I went through, I know these agencies would not have issued the applicant's permit for the walkover if the walkover would have a detrimental effect on the environment or the birds. I've heard the arguments against the walkover and believe, as a person that lives in the area full-time and walks the area almost daily, still need to respond to some of the opinions that I have heard. I feel the most important issue that I've heard is as follows. Nesting birds in the proposed walkover area. In my observation for many years, the nesting birds do not use this area. They nest far to the south in the open beach sand. The walkover would allow predators in the CWA. This is not an issue, as anyone that knows this area realizes that there are numerous areas of the direct land connection predators to enter the CWA. The last and least important issue to me is the decision to deny this applicant greatly affects our property values. What is important to me is the beachfront. Property owners have the legal right to enjoy their property for its intended purpose of being beachfront and access to the beach. I also have a numerous conservation area that have been to numerous conservation
Sir, I hate
areas.
to cut you off, but you're past your time. Can you just submit that letter to us and we'll make it part of the record? Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hello. Hi.
Good morning.
John Cameron, 8098 Estero, a few houses down from the proposed beach walkover. I'm obviously in favor of that, just from the standpoint of my own selfish reasons. because I'm made to look like I'm selfish for wanting to access a beach not by you, by other people. In any event, it seems obvious to me that the gentlemen here are not going to stop. And I don't blame them, and I hope they do continue. If they are successful in the next round, should you deny their application, I think we all know what's going to happen. And the CWA that everybody is so intent on protecting, which I enjoy as well, is going to be no more. And so you guys, I know you got your heels kind of dug in on this, but please think about that. This is not just today, and it's not just their property. Other people do it as well. And finally, think about the money. This is going to be expensive. And who knows, maybe there'll even be punitive damages, I don't know. But, you know, this is my tax dollars that are going to be spent on this. And I think you're going to lose.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Are there anybody else? Yes, ma'am? Our new MRF representative. Good morning.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Witness has been sworn.
Thank you. And I wasn't prepared to speak, but I just, after hearing everyone's passion, and I appreciate it all, I have to say I missed a town council meeting on January 31st, I believe it was, in regards to our new lighting. I missed it, and I really wanted to be here, but I missed it because Crow called me. They had a turn that needed to be released, that actually they took care of, and they were able to release, I was able to release it. The only condition was they asked that I find like birds on the beach. I spent 4 hours driving from one end of the island to the other. I couldn't find any like birds. So I released it with pelicans at Bowditch Park. And another tern came and flew, and they went off, and it was a good thing. But I couldn't believe I couldn't see birds on the island. It was ridiculous. Anyhow, I would just like to state I'm against walkover dunes. I think it will change the face of our beach, and I appreciate your time and your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make public comment in this public hearing? Seeing none? Did you say something? You see somebody? Is somebody raising their hand? They're scratching their head. Way to psych us out. Okay. No, sir. No, but if I was going to give it to anybody, it'd be you. All right. The public comment is closed. Okay, let me just move here. Mr. Herron, you made a comment earlier about the book. Have you gone through it?
Yes, ma'am. As we all look.
Ms. Petrick, I'm going to allow you to speak again, so if you'd come up.
Since we already indicated we would accept it as a proffer, do we need to go through it?
No, I think that there's a difference for proffer and what you actually accept.
Okay, so you want to delineate what we're accepting for evidence and what we're delineating as accepting for proffer? Thank you.
There are 15 items in the 15 tabs listed on the index. As I understand it, there was testimony with regard to, obviously, Mr. Johnson's resume, the photographs that he took, which are tabs 1 and 2. To the extent that there's a survey on tab 3, I don't think that there was any testimony, and it's duplicative of what's already in the special exception file. It's part of the package, I think, because that's part of that material. I don't know whether or not you wish to exclude that.
I don't think it matters.
Duplicative. For the photographs, I think that you all decided already to accept those. There were the aerial photograph, number 5, I believe that there was testimony to that by Mr. Johnson. The tab number 6 is redundant, but it's part of the code. Again, I think that's, I'm not sure if it's part of the packet, but there was testimony regarding it. Number 7, building back the sand dunes. I don't recall any testimony regarding that item in tab 7.
There was not.
Same with respect to number 8, DEP recommended plants for dune restoration.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just as a point of order, there was discussion about that document being consistent with the list of plants in your town code as being dune plants. So that was testimony elicited.
Okay.
Sorry. So I have a question mark next date. Number 9, the FFWC CWA website page. There wasn't any testimony regarding the web page. Um, 10, there was testimony regarding the DEP guidance document. Number 11, the time lapse. I know that Mr. Croner, I believe, again, up to you. I don't know if you ruled upon the relevance of it. Number 12, I don't recall any testimony with respect to that map. And you already excluded number 13. And then as respect to 14 and 15, I don't believe there was any testimony regarding items 14 or 15.
Okay, so without objection from the council, we're going to remove these from the book?
Personally, I don't think anything that's in the book was new. Even though we had testimony about it, part of the testimony I asked to be excluded, and my vote would be that the entire book be accepted as a proffer, but is not new.
I don't disagree about the newness, but I do disagree with some of the points here, because my understanding was that if there was confusion, lack of understanding, misstatements, that they had to write in the rehearing to try to correct that.
So
And
which sections would you include?
anything that had to do with the dune walkover, because people were saying this is not a dune walkover, and they're trying to promote that it is a dune.
To be specific for the record, which sections were
I
they?
have no idea. I haven't
Well,
read.
but we need to vote on it. So
That's fine.
I'm willing to go along with you if you tell me which sections.
Well, what was it, 10 and 11 had to do with dunes? Yeah, 10. Here, another one. 8 had to do with flowers or something. 7, building back the dunes, sand dunes. 6 as the definition of dunes from our comp plan.
Well, that's definitely not new. We've all, or we don't need to include that
No.
as part of our code.
No, but it's not, the idea is, where we get this new thing, I thought the criteria was consideration of new evidence or the points of law which the applicant believes the town overlooked or misunderstood at the original hearing. So to me, those are misunderstandings where people were saying this is not a dune walkover.
Okay.
And, you know,
Okay, I'm willing to accept the numbers that Mr. Butcher has.
I don't have any
has
problem
indicated.
leaving them in either.
that's it.
Okay?
And are you willing to accept the?
Yep. Okay, so Ms. Petrick, any final comments?
There were a couple of items that were mentioned in the public comments that I just want to make sure that we've kind of addressed because they are relevant to the rehearing. The first of which is there's been a number of stated concerns about precedent. I do want to identify for you that Mr. Herron has advised in a variety of settings, as I understand it, that no single land use application is precedent for any other, and therefore the concern about precedent it would be inconsistent with the procedure that you yourselves apply when you are considering individual land use applications. So that's number one. Then number two, there were a couple of statements, and this goes back to this idea of, are we a dune walkover? Do we clear dune vegetation? That we are not dune preservationists because of where the boardwalk lands. In your Division of Administrative Hearing transcripts, in that file that you have already received, what you will find is that the terminus of the proposed dune walkover exists where it does because that's what DEP asked for. We did every single thing DEP asked. And when DEP field verifies this structure, when that, if it ever comes to be, where DEP says is the least intrusive place is where it will go. This is not our dictate as to where it belongs. It is what we do in response to the people who have stewardship over these resources. And so I just want to make that piece clear because it seemed a little like there was a misunderstanding there. The last piece is there's been this discussion about the offer of beach access from the condominium. The one thing that I do want to, I don't know if it's technically an objection, but there has been no official offer of access. There's been no explanation for how these homeowners will get to that location and under what terms they will be able to avail themselves of. However, my understanding is that the area that is being discussed would be the open sandy beach. And in the Division of Administrative Hearing case, what the overwhelming evidence of both sides is that where you find the birds of most concern is in the open sand. And so all of the bird studies that were submitted during that Division of Administrative Hearing case showed that all of your most vulnerable birds you find in the open sands. Directing traffic there rather than on the salt and pepper vegetation that is directly south of this I always get confused because I live on the east coast of Florida, so you have to apologize or accept my apology on that. But directly waterward of this property, that's not a benefit to add more people to that open sandy space. So I think it is a misimpression for folks to get up and say the condo is allowing them to use this space without more information and without an understanding of what that means to direct foot traffic there. That does not resolve this issue. And as to the remaining points that were made in our request for rehearing, I know that you have read it and carefully considered it, and I appreciate all of the effort and time and attention you have spent on this. I'm a board certified local government attorney, and I have been in front of, I can't count how many local government boards, and so I very much appreciate the professionalism that you've brought to this process, and so however you decide, thank you for your time.
Ms. Petrick, thank you very much. Are there any final questions for Ms. Petrick? Okay. Mr. Herron, you have any final comments?
Just with regard to the easement proffer, the document I think has been provided to the applicant, and I'll just very briefly read what it says. Now therefore, in consideration of the department's issuance of the permit to Castle Beach Condominium Association, which is a valuable consideration to grantor, and in consideration of the covenants herein, the grantor, which is the condo association, hereby grants and conveys to the general public a non-exclusive easement across the property described in Exhibit B. In other words, the general public, anyone, including the unit owners of Castle Beach Condominium, but not to the exclusion of anyone else, including the applicants, have the right to traverse this easement to access the beach at that location. It is a grant of easement to the general public.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the council?
I have a question. Is access to this public?
It is in the public records, and it is, yes, it is the equivalent of what others may call deeded. It is a legally binding, of record easement, an access easement that runs in favor of the general public.
Very generous of those folks down there.
It's been in place since 1992.
No,
Yeah.
no. Well, what's been in place since 1992, someone
That-
said, was the access for Laguna Shores. Is that right?
Yes, but that document reads, that it's for the general public.
In 1992?
Yes, sir.
This is not new.
That document is new. It is not new in the, but it is new to this hearing. Yes, it is definitely new. Any further questions for the staff? If not, gentlemen, I know you're waiting to hear what I'm going to say. And so I'm going to make a motion to deny the application. There was no new evidence presented in this hearing, in this rehearing, that compels me to change my position. And I do not believe that it is in compliance with our land development code or our comprehensive plan.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion?
I do have some comments to make.
I have some comments as well. First.
I have one statement to make too.
Thank you, Rexanne.
Sorry, I can't second until you.
Okay. Go ahead, Rexanne.
Okay, well, I'd like to make comments. First, I'm going to make some scattered comments in response to things that I've heard. Many people have indicated that they felt that we were bound by the other lawsuits in this case, and I want to make clear for the record that this hearing is based on our statutes, and we're to consider what the town of Fort Myers Beach allows. And so it is a very different consideration than the other lawsuits that I have been asked my opinion about whether we will prevail if we are sued. I want to tell you that I would.
Roxanne,
What?
I'm going to stop you on that because it does not pertain to the motion. That's correct.
Okay.
You want to argue with me about the process?
No.
It does, it doesn't pertain to the motion.
The rules for rehearing are regarding what they are allowed to present, not what we are allowed to say when we vote, is my understanding.
But the motion, discussion is always about the motion, and whether or not, however the gentlemen decide to proceed, isn't relative to the motion of denial.
Okay, well, Mr. Rude, you asked the question, I'll give you my answer later, because I'm evidently on what I can say. I will say that there is something that I feel is necessary to correct for the record, and this is, and I say this out of the greatest respect for Mr. Hughes. I have great respect for you, sir, but you read a sentence from our Policy 5D1, Coastal Management Policy, etc. You read a sentence and did not read the sentence that preceded it. That sentence refers back, the word "they" refers back to the sentence that precedes it. So, just for the record, our code does not say dune walkover should be constructed where they do not exist. The word "they" refers to plants, not to dune walkover. I'm going to not say several of the things that I had planned to say, although I did discuss them in advance with Mr. Hare, and I was under the impression I could say a few things. What I'm going to say is this. This matter is before us today because the applicants wish to build a structure. I'm going to use the word structure because everybody keeps arguing about what it's called. A structure in the EC zone. No one has the right to build a structure in the EC zone unless they get a special exception. So that's what we're here to look at today. And a special exception within our code has a series of considerations and factors. They are 34-88A through I, and I want to say for the record that I have considered 3488-A through I. We are also to consider special exception findings, which are listed on page 75 of our packet. We are mandated to consider those A, B, and C as well. And I did consider all of these factors previously, and I am considering them now in making my decision to continue to deny the application.
Thank you, Rex. Ray, you said you had comments?
Yes. You can stop me anytime you want when you deem that it's not relevant to the motion. But I just wrote some notes down, so I'm just going to go through them. Councilman Butcher and I, you know, the politically expedient thing for us to do today is just to say yes with everybody else and fall in and be done with it. But I can't do that. I can't do that because, one, I've been against it already, and number two, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror in the morning doing something like that. I've heard some comments made along this route that my environmental record may come into question about my vote here. I've got a long history on this beach that goes back, that's well documented in my environmental history. I think you know it, and I don't have to recite all that here today. No, I won't. But it's here. The dune walkover or structure, Rexanne, structure itself has certainly got all of this attention. I will tell you that this business with the predators and so forth, and it was noted by the gentleman here earlier about the predators already being out there. I have fished that end of the island for about 40 years. I fished that tidal basin when it was actually a tidal basin, and I caught snook, redfish, trout, tarpon, and everything else that ran through there. I'll move along.
When you start talking about fishing, I just know it could be.
Well, all right, forget all that. But I also fished on the other side of it at nighttime for sharks. And at nighttime, non-turtle season, mind you, we have lights out there that we shine out onto these sharks when we bring them into the beach so we can safely return them back to the water. On occasion, the light would go like this, turn around, and shine into that critical wildlife area. And I'll tell you what was looking back at me when the light went in there, were eyes like this. Those weren't birds, ladies and gentlemen. Those were.
Ray, the
I was
motion.
limited.
The motion, I'm getting ready to limit him. Your discussion must pertain to the motion.
What was the motion? Would you reread the motion?
The motion is to deny the request.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to deny the request. Forget about what Murphy says about the fishing and so forth. In 2016, the DEP issued a permit to approve the structure. In 2017, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission issued a CCL permit with conditions to approve the project. In 2018, the DEP issued a construction permit seaward of the CCCL. On March 20th of 2019, the administrative law judge entered his final order approving the permits and authorizing construction. On October 16th of 2019, our very own LPA here on Fort Myers Beach, who were appointed by all of us, approved that structure with conditions on a 7-0 vote. Approved it.
Yes, we know all of this.
Okay.
None of that precludes them from having to seek a special exception.
Okay. We also have we members here have a fiduciary responsibility, and that was brought up earlier as well, to the taxpayers here at Fort Myers Beach. It's my understanding that over $90,000 in legal costs have been put forward, so forth. That's just hard legal costs. God knows how much has been spent in staff time and
We're not
everything
going
else.
to talk about that. It has nothing to do with the motion.
Okay.
You know, it's hard to monitor people that you really like.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ray.
I'm trying to look here to see what. Well, I have much more, and maybe somebody else will want to hear it later, but anyhow, I'm going to vote as I did last time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanne, do you have any comments?
Brief comment. Each time that I have studied this, anytime that I have voted to deny this special exception application, it's been based on the entire body of evidence presented. And at today's rehearing, I have heard no new issues of fact or misinterpretation of law to the facts presented by the applicants today that would change my vote. So I will vote to deny.
Bruce, do you have any comments?
Yeah, just a couple, not like Ray though.
He came in with notes.
I did too. I got lots of notes. Okay, anyhow. I read the hundreds of pages over again, and it was interesting today to hear the public testimony. Some of it was inaccurate. And for instance, they said, well, you know, why don't you just traipse through everybody's backyard and get up to a walkway that's existing? Well, the problem with that is people put fences up and signs that say no trespassing, so you can't always do what seems like an easy thing to do. And that has happened there, and that's why we've gotten part of this predicament. The option, one of the options is to continue to wade through the lagoon. And I heard people saying that they, from some areas, wade through the lagoon today, and then they go tromping over the grass and the bushes and flowers and possibly nest. The idea of this walkway is to avoid that. When I look through the criteria for the special exemption, I find that this meets the criteria, and in some cases where the town staff talked about where it did not meet it, it was inaccurate. It says that this boardwalk would restrict or limit navigation within the lagoon. Well, there's no navigation within the lagoon, so that's a false statement. And it says the boardwalk proposes within a dynamic lagoon system. Well, so what? The pier out here is in a dynamic ocean condition, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be there. So, I agree with Ray.
Okay. I'll call the roll vote, and I thank you all very much for being so civilized today, because I know that everyone, Mr. Rude, Mr. Kramer, they're passionate. You all are passionate. Thank you all for being so exceptional today. Bruce, your vote. No, I'm sorry. My vote making the motion is no. Rexanne, your vote for this?
No,
The motion to deny.
It's motion to deny, so you would be voting yes.
Gosh darn it, you're right.
No, you can't
Motion.
change, can
No, you did. You're right. You're right. Okay, so my vote is yes. Your vote, Rexanne.
I vote yes on the motion to deny.
Bruce, your vote.
No.
Ray, your vote.
Nay.
And Joanne, your vote.
Yes.
And the motion carries 3-1, 3-2. Okay, so thank you all very much. We will move on to, are a bunch of you leaving? We'll take, yes, okay. We're gonna,
Keep it on?
there is lunch, so if you, when you're ready, let me know. It'll be a half an hour.
And I'm supposed to be in downtown Fort Myers at 5:30, so I'd like
Okay, Amy. All right, if everybody would go ahead and take your seat again. We'll go on with the next item, which is a second reading and public hearing for ordinance 20-03 DCI 201-90073. It's the rezoning of 2639-41 Estero Boulevard. Mr. Herron, do I need to read the title of this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ordinance number 20-03, an ordinance of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, approving an amendment to 0.17 plus or minus acres of the current zoning map for a property located, excuse me, at 2639, 2641 Estero Boulevard, Fort Myers Beach, from residential commercial, RC zoning district, to institutional, IN zoning district, providing for severability, providing for conflicts of law, and providing for an effective date. This is a second and final public reading. Mr. Herron?
Yes, ma'am. As this rezoning is for a particular piece of property, technically it does qualify as a quasi-judicial item. Therefore, if there's an audience who's going to speak to ordinance 2003, they need to be sworn in.
Is anyone going to speak to this particular public hearing? If you will, please stand. Seeing no one, except for our two staff members.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
The witness has been sworn. At this time, it would be appropriate to disclose any ex parte communications the council members may have had with respect to this item.
Thank you, sir. Joanne?
One email, it's on the public record.
Thank you. Rexanne?
Nothing.
Ray? Nothing. Bruce? Okay, I have nothing. Jason?
Good afternoon, sorry. Jason Green, Community Development. The application before you is to rezone property from RC to the institutional. It's got, obviously, staff did an independent evaluation of this and found that this is the appropriate district. You have a recommendation of approval from your LPA, and staff report is in your packet, and I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Questions for Jason? Anyone? This is the piece of property that the town acquired. Right.
No, it's a piece of Estero that's adjacent to
To
the
Bay
existing
Oaks.
Bay Oaks Park, correct.
Okay. No questions for staff? Thank you, Jason. No, public comment is open, or public hearing is open. Any public comment? Seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the
Spot here.
ordinance.
Second.
Okay, and thank you both very much. If I could, there we go. Yes, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Because this is a question item, I would request
Movement and the seconder to state that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development regulations, meet the appropriate criteria for the property to be rezoned.
Pat.
Okay, so Mr. is reflecting in his vote that it does meet the comprehensive plan requirements and the stipulations as stated within the staff report.
I agree too.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second. Mr. Herron, do we need a roll call vote on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Murphy, your vote?
Aye.
Mr. Butcher, your vote?
Yes.
Ms. Hassafras, your
Yes.
vote? Mrs. Champ, your vote?
Yes.
And Anita's vote is also yes. The motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next item, which is the second reading and public hearing of ordinance 2006, vacation of town interest in real property. And let me go to the proper page 350. This is ordinance 20-06, an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, repealing subdivision 2 of division 5 of article 2 of chapter 10 entitled Vacation of Town Interest in Real Property of the town of Fort Myers Beach Land Development Code and adopting a new article 6 of chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances of the town of Fort Myers Beach entitled Vacation of Town Interest in Real Property, regarding the vacation of town-owned property and right-of-way, providing for inclusion in the code and Scrivener's errors, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Is there anyone who is going to testify in this case?
This is not.
Not, we don't have to have that,
No, this is
okay?
an ordinance of general
Very
applicability,
good,
and
thank
it's
you,
not-
sir. That last one did me in. Okay,
Madam Mayor?
yes, sir.
I'll take the lead since.
Thank you.
This ordinance has been requested by the town council several months back. It's gone through the vetting process at the MNP, prior discussions, and here at the town council level. It is properly before you on second reading. I do have a copy of the proof of publication. And basically what this ordinance does is it streamlines the process for the vacation of town interest in right-of-way and property. On second reading, the document reflects the changes that you requested at first reading regarding the requirement that the application, once submitted, does have to go to the LPA unless it's been previously reviewed and approved by the LPA and the town council as part of a development process. Does provide for the noticing to property owners within 500 feet. And it also contains the other change that you requested regarding the entities that the applicant has to reach out to as part of the application process, as well as the public hearing process, all in accordance with your direction.
Okay, questions for Mr. Herron on this? Joanne?
I just have one. It's 300 and 500. Am I wrong? Am I looking at the wrong thing?
What page?
355. Still says 300, but it's been switched to 500, but the 300.
We'll strike that out in the,
Thank you.
in the version that gets signed by the mayor.
Thank you.
But the intent is the,
And the only other thing I just wanted to say to Mr. Herron that I appreciate on page 362 through 364, his explanation about this going to the LPA at this point. I struggled mightily with that.
Yes.
And I accept his legal opinion on that, so I'm good. All the other changes that I wanted have been made, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joanne. Roxanne, any questions?
I have none.
Ray, any questions?
I had the same concerns Joe
Okay,
apparently has been.
excellent. Bruce, anything?
I had one question. On 352, maybe it's just my poor reading and understanding.
Page 352?
Packet page 352 at the
Yep.
top.
Oh, I have that highlighted for some reason. Okay.
Shall include title, certificate, attorney's opinion, blah, 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 covered by the plat or portion of the plat for which vacation is sought. When I read that, and maybe it's my reading, that sounds like I want this area right here that's owned by the town, and I'm supposed to show my property tax and that I own it? That's how it reads to me.
yes. The short answer to your question is yes. It has been discussed before, the property owner owns the underlying property. It's the right of public use or superior use that the town and the public has by virtue of the dedication language on the plat. But the simple answer is yes, they would have to show that the property taxes have been paid and aren't in arrears as part of this process. And that was in your previous regulations.
Confuses me. So if I'm on Denora and I want the town to vacate that property that's not shown on my plat, how am I supposed to show that I had title to that?
It's shown on the plat. It's not part of your
your property
conveyed to you, it may reflect that, but reference to the plat is what the property that is the subject of the plat. So, parcel 2 of plat of the plat book 7, you know, that's, if you are the owner of that platted lot, that encompasses the area that's being vacated, then you would.
Doesn't encompass it.
It would show it.
It's adjacent to it.
Not necessarily, but the
Well,
point.
in the case of the Nora, it is. There's the lot, that's the proposed unintended town property and the seawall.
They would show that they pay their property taxes on that they own.
Yes.
Because they're now going to receive. Town council.
That's what I thought that intended, but when I read that, that's not how it reads to me.
You think it reads that they would have to show they've paid taxes on everything up to the seawall?
Yes.
Oh.
That's the way I read it.
Does anybody else read it that way?
No.
You don't? I didn't either, but I did have it highlighted, so. Okay, do you understand now?
Oh, you understand.
I think
Interpretation.
it's
And
correct
that's-
according to the attorney.
That's precisely how we will apply it.
Okay. Anybody else have comments or questions? All right, I'll open the public comment, or public hearing. Chris? Thank you. Come on, you don't have to be sworn in. Thank you.
Followed by
Thanks for being willing to.
Christine Patton. I own my house at 153 Primo, where I've lived for nearly 45 years. I've been a resident of Fort Myers Beach even longer, since 1958. Progress has never bothered me, but since incorporation, it has for the most part been to code and compatible with what we have on our island. Now this council wants to change our code. This current council wants to weaken protections in our land development code as it pertains to vacating, selling, swapping property owned by the public. I object to vacations of streets that provide access to the beach and bay. Our code says, quote, "The city recognizes it is unlawful to vacate public rights-of-ways solely for private purposes. It's intended to ensure that vacations are legally effective and the property rights of landowners are protected," end quote. Last meeting, this council wanted to change our code so that the landowners within 500 feet would not be notified of what's happening in our neighborhood by changing it to 300 feet. Thank you all, since all 5 of you said you wanted to keep it at 500 feet. But this is moving way too fast. These changes to our code must go before LPA for their recommendations. In fact, in a recent memo to mayor and council regarding the proposed vacation ordinance, Town Attorney John Aaron's opinion is that the LPA should be included in the process for subdivisions. The vacation is actually called vacation because it is a vacation of a street shown on a subdivision plat, and therefore because it is a vacation of subdivision of land, this vacation ordinance should go to the LPA. We believe courts will see this as a subdivision plat vacation, and what is the harm in sending this to the LPA for their suggestions? At last meeting, at an NBC2 interview, Mayor Anita Saracita said that council would change the rules so that TPI could reapply and be granted the easements and Margaritaville could move forward. The people of Fort Myers Beach should be up in arms with the town taking away our easements to benefit private purposes and changing our code to make it easier to do so island-wide. When future councils use this code to take away public easements, beach and bay access all over the island could be lost. When they take away your easements, you'll wonder why you allowed this to happen. Please do not pass this ordinance change. Send it to the LPA as our code demands. Let's take the time to get this right. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Ralph Brooks, attorney, 1217 East Cape Coral Parkway, representing Christine Patton. First of all, thank you for changing the notice back to 500 feet and making sure the notice actually gets mailed out and we don't just have labels. There are 2 things I wanted to bring up. One is we really shouldn't be exempting out the LPA. In future applications, it says they won't have to go to the LPA if the LPA has already considered a development approval for that parcel. Well, the LPA considers a different set of factors and a different set of criteria for the vacation of streets, and may not have been contemplated and it may not have been reviewed under the criteria that you're adopting today. So we would ask that all street vacation applications go back to the LPA. Now, with regard to this ordinance, I have to respectfully disagree with your town attorney, John Herron, who I've known and respected for many years, and we both get along. First of all, the case he cites, Lippy, is about jet skis, personal watercraft, and that's clearly not a land development code. But the vacation of streets is a shortening of the phrase. It's a vacationing of a subdivision plat. You're vacating a plat, a subdivision plat. It's the subdividing of land into more than 3 parcels and setting up roads. Now, when you're vacating a road that's shown on a plat, it's not merely an easement that's on land that you own underneath. Typically, a subdivision plat, your lot line will end, and then this public street will begin. So you're subdividing that public street into three or more parcels anytime you're doing more than a part of a street that just has 2 lots. So if it has 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 lots, or goes up through a bunch of lots, you're actually subdividing that public street and assigning that land to the adjacent parcels. So it does involve the development of land. It also changes the use of land, a material change in use and appearance of the structure of land, because you're not using it for a public street anymore. Now it's going to be used for private property for whatever private purpose. So I'd ask that you send this through the LPA now for proper adoption of a land development ordinance, and that you include the LDA in the future on individual applications so they can apply the criteria that you're adopting today, not some criteria that might have been reviewed a year ago under a different ordinance. Thank you.
Sir, anyone else care to make comments? Russell?
Afternoon.
Good
Mayor,
afternoon.
Members of the council, for your record, I'm Russell Schropp here today on behalf of TPIF entities. Reviewed Mr. Herron's memo before the meeting today. Nature of the action being taken, and I concur with it. The town, in dealing with vacation requests, is acting in its proprietary capacity rather than its regulatory capacity, or review by the LPA is not required. State law, in addition, provides broad discretion to governing bodies of towns, municipalities, and counties to deal with vacation of rights-of-ways and plats. And so the ordinance that you're considering adopting today, I think, purview. TPI will be refiling its request to vacate certain plats and right-of-way, certain portions of the plat and right-of-way. That town council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Mr. Hughes?
Daniel Hughes, for the record, member of the LPA, and I'm confused. I would like some clarification. It was my understanding when I got wind of this ordinance being drafted, I mentioned it at an earlier LPA hearing to Mr. Herron, were we going to be involved? And he said, no, you won't be involved because it doesn't require land development. Do I now understand that the proposed new ordinance, which I have not seen, will in fact require a referral to the LPA?
No.
Okay. Well, what was the change then with the LPA or not the LPA?
Since we don't comment, public comment, I'll refer to that when we have comments here.
All right. Seems to me that this is an ordinance which amends the land development code, right? Okay. Enough said.
Thank you, Dan. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment? Okay. We'll close that section and come back to the council. Mr. Herron, do you want to comment on Mr. Hughes's concerns?
Yeah, members, and as Mr. Brooks indicated, we can agree to disagree. I've set forth in the memo that's in the package the reasoning why it is the town attorney's opinion that this does not require this ordinance go before the LPA. It is not a land development regulation, pure and simple, as defined by state statute and Florida courts.
It does not result in the subdivision of property into 3 parcels or more moving forward. Furthermore, the definition of, it's not in the memo, but the definition of development excludes development within platted rights-of-way. So all these issues mitigate or alleviate the need for this ordinance to go to the LPA. To the extent that you all have separately decided to refer the applications to the LPA, that is your prerogative. But the ordinance itself does not have to go before the LPA for consideration. The fact that someone originally put this ordinance or these regulations in the Land Development Code does not, by definition or otherwise, make it a land development regulation that it subjects it to review by the LPA under your code or state law. And the example that I've mentioned to many of you is someone, my predecessor, elected to put the code enforcement regulations in your land development code. Certainly that ordinance has, and those sections of the code have nothing to do with the development of land. It's an enforcement mechanism. Under the theory that is being argued or mentioned here, anything that is put in intentionally or inadvertently in the land development code, whether it's a land development regulation or not, would have to always go back to the LPA. And that, frankly, that's not consistent with state law and the court opinions, as well as your code itself.
Thank you, John. Any questions for staff? If there are none, if I can, go ahead, Roxanne.
I'd like to move to adopt ordinance 20-06 with the amendment that the numbers 300 on page 6 are deleted.
Briefly mentioned in accordance with the rules that this is properly before you, it has been advertised, as evidenced by the affidavit of publication that the clerk has on file.
Thank you very much.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so this is pulled up on your screens now. So there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Yes, I'd just like to briefly mention that I always have a serious concern, and we've discussed this previously, especially about streets that end at the water, be it the Bay or the Gulf of Mexico. And I feel that we've clearly provided a protection within here for that, and for the streets, the people that are nearby that utilize those. So I'm comfortable with this, so I will be supporting it as well.
Thank you very much.
It should be roll call, Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle.
You're very welcome.
The motion was made by Ms. Hassefras, your vote,
Yes.
and it was seconded by Mr. Murphy, your vote.
Aye.
Mr. Butcher?
Yes.
Ms. Sham?
Yes.
And me, and it's yes, it carries unanimously. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Mr. Herron, for your work on that. The next hearing.
Could I ask a question?
You may.
My understanding is the FAA is going to be here at
1:30.
If we want a chance to bolt some food before they get here, we only have less than 20 minutes.
Amy said she needed a half an hour. You still don't need a half an hour, you're good to go.
The FAA is 1:30.
Oh, is it 1:30?
1:30.
I thought they were here at 1.
1:30.
My apologies.
So
They
let's,
probably arrive at 1:15, and we should be here,
so would you like to break
working
now?
smartly. I think we ought to.
Okay. Any
Out of
objection to breaking?
courtesy, they've come from
Okay,
Georgia,
we're going to,
Atlanta.
so we're going to break.
Recess.
Yep, we're going to recess for a bit.
So we're going to come back to
And,
this meeting after the FAA?
We are.
Yes.
We are. So this meeting is going to stand in recess until we
said that
complete
on the
our
record.
discussion with the FAA, and then we will reconvene.
I got until tomorrow, I've already said that.
Me too.
Going fishing.
Yeah.
Michelle, how are we setting, are we going to just
Sure.